Chapter 3806. Yuja smiled bitterly and shook his head. Young Master Su, this person looks completely different from that Lin second. You can tell with one glance. Actually, it wasn't just their looks that were completely different. That Lin second gave you the impression that he was a very cunning and troublesome guy. He wasn't like Mang Jueguang, who liked to brag and create hype and had problems with his intelligence. He sounded like two completely different people. It was only because of Su Lingchong's face that Yuja couldn't just leave like that after spending so much effort to come all the way to the welcoming pavilion. From his point of view, even if this Lin wasn't the Lin heir he was looking for, he couldn't rule out the possibility of other newbies. Brother Meng, the newcomer I'm looking for, other than having outstanding strength, should have a lot of spirit jades on hand. At least a few hundred spirit jades shouldn't be a problem. I wonder if this Lin Yi or the other newcomers fit this condition. Yuja changed the subject. He didn't plan on talking about what happened that day in detail because it involved the Star Inkstone and Supreme Grade Foundation barrier-breaking pill. If he said it in front of Su Lingchong and the others, then even if he could successfully pull out Lin's second, he probably wouldn't have anything to do with it. Yuja didn't mind being a hired thug for a young master like Su Lingchong, but when it came to these great treasures, then there was nothing to say. In reality, let alone this eldest young master Su, who he didn't have much of a relationship with, Yuja and even his own master, Nan Tianyong, had never mentioned the matter of the Star Inkstone or the top-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill. In front of benefits, not caring about family was the true nature of a cultivator. A few hundred spirit jades? That's impossible. Lin is just a pauper. Never mind a few hundred, it's already good enough that he could take out one. As for the other newcomers, although they don't have a few hundred, they're definitely much better than a pauper like Lin Yi. Mang Jueguang flatly denied it. Until now, he thought that Yuja had come to find someone for something good, so he kept belittling Lin Yi. But what he said wasn't false. At least in the eyes of others, including him, Lin Yi really couldn't have any spirit jades on him, as long as he could get his hands on a few pieces of good jade. They were immediately swapped with scrap jades by the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers. With the ferocity of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, they would be able to leave a good piece of jade for Lin Yi. That was already a great mercy. As for a few hundred spiritual jades, this was simply impossible. There might not even be a few hundred pieces of useless jade. What's more, a scrap jade could only fool an idiot like Lin Yi. If he used it outside, it would be impossible to get away with it. Once discovered, he would be beaten to death on the spot. Hearing Mang Jueguang's words, Yuja immediately eliminated the possibility of Lin Yi. After all, other than a slight resemblance to Mang Jueguang in terms of physique, everything else, be it in terms of appearance, style of doing things, or Ling Yu's family background, he was a completely different person from the Lin heir he knew. There was no connection between the two. Seeing Yuja's somewhat disappointed expression, Mang Jueguang couldn't help but ask, "Senior brother Yu, why are you spending so much effort to find this newcomer? I don't dare to boast about anything else, but I know every single newcomer in Blue Cloud Pavilion like the back of my hand. Why don't you tell me the specifics? Maybe I can help you look for one?" His intention in saying this was to see if he could gain any benefits from this. If he could also push Meng Tong out. Yuja was originally disappointed, but hearing Mang Jueguang's words, his eyes immediately lit up. In Welcoming Pavilion, Mang Jueguang was an out-and-out local snake. When it came to understanding the newcomers in Welcoming Pavilion, he was far above people like eldest young Master Su and Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng. If he wanted to find someone, it would be a piece of cake. It would naturally be best if he could help. Then many thanks for Brother Meng's good intentions. The person I'm looking for is called Lin Heir. Of course, this is most likely an alias. As for the conditions, it's what I just told you. I won't hide it from you, Brother Meng. This person is my irreconcilable mortal enemy. I almost died at his hands a while ago, I must avenge this enmity, so I'll have to trouble Brother Meng to help me. Yu Zhi pleaded with a sincere expression. F***CK. When Meng Jueguang heard this, he really wanted to slap himself. After beating around the bush for so long, he didn't get any so-called benefits. It turned out that the person this guy was looking for was his mortal enemy. He was so focused on belittling Lin Yi, and even wanted Meng Tong to replace him. Now that he thought about it, didn't his words turn out to be a great help to Lin Yi and help him clear his suspicions? If he had known earlier, he would have inverted the truth and tried his best to lure Lin Yi. Who cared if Lin Yi was the Lin heir that this guy was looking for? First, he would have sowed discord and killed the suspicion on Lin Yi. When the time came, he would have made a great enemy for Lin Yi for no reason. Wouldn't that be great? Such a great opportunity was wasted by him. Instead, he carelessly helped Lin Yi block a calamity. This was King cheap. However, the words had already been said. No matter how much Meng Jueguang regretted it, he couldn't change his words. He could only vaguely nod his head and give a perfunctory reply. Young Master Su, Pavilion Master, who? I still want to take a look at the other 2 pavilions' newcomer arenas. Is that possible? Yu Zhi turned his head and asked Su Lingchong, since he couldn't find the person he was looking for in the Blue Cloud Pavilion. Then he would turn around and take a look at the Soaring Sky Pavilion and the Mysterious Pavilion. This was a very normal logic. Moreover, the strength of the newcomers in the 2 pavilions was definitely higher than the Blue Cloud Pavilion. The possibility of Lin air being mixed in there was also much higher than in the Blue Cloud Pavilion. However, this was the Welcoming Pavilion's territory. Under normal circumstances, outsiders like him were not allowed to casually wander around. Of course, as long as Su Lingchong and Hu Yunfeng nodded their heads, there would naturally be no problem. Go ahead. Su Lingchong impatiently waved his hand and signaled Hu Yunfeng to accompany him. Although he didn't achieve his goal of getting someone else to do his dirty work, this guy was still an inner disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. His attitude towards young Master Su was also very respectful. He could barely be considered half one of his own, so it wasn't a big deal to do him a favor. Seeing Yu Zhi and Hu Yunfeng leave, the corner of Lin Yi's mouth couldn't help but curve up. As he expected, this move of first impressing others worked. Although the location was slightly far, Lin Yi couldn't hear what Yu Zhi and the others were talking about. However, he was still able to hear a few bits and pieces and roughly understand the situation. Chapter 3807. Of course, Meng Jueguang didn't realize this. Now that he realized it, he was probably regretting it so much that his intestines would turn green. What was called being too smart for one's own good? This was how people like Meng Jueguang, who thought he was always smart, thought so highly of himself. After Yu Zhi, the uninvited guest, left, he was a little puzzled. Lin 1, Lin 2, their names were similar. Logically speaking, they should be the same person. Could it be that those people heard wrong? Not many people knew Lin 2's name, but when he was selling the spirit beasts, it was heard by some people. Now that Yu Zhi found out about it, it was reasonable for there to be a mistake. The 5th round of the Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge officially began. This time was different from the past. Eldest Miss Shangguan and eldest young Master Su were watching from the sidelines. Any normal person would want to be in the limelight and leave a good impression on these 2 people. It should be known that if one of these 2 people took a liking to them and took them in as a follower, their future would be meteoric. With such thoughts, in addition to the grudges accumulated from the previous 4 rounds, today's rookie challenge could be said to be filled with the smell of gunpowder from the beginning to the end. It was an exciting match. As usual, the first battle to begin was still the highlight of the top 5. Xiao Ran from the 14th abode at the foot of the mountain challenged Meng Tong from the 13th abode at the foot of the mountain. After hearing Xiao Ran call out his name, Meng Tong's face fell. He exchanged glances with Meng Jueguang, who also had a helpless expression. In the end, he braced himself and walked onto the stage with heavy steps. This was different from the previous round. In the previous round, in order to trick Xiao Hongkai, Meng Tong took a 4th rank great recovery pill and healed, but he still pretended to be injured. However, in this round, Meng Tong wasn't so lucky as to obtain a 3rd grade 4 great cyclic pill from Meng Jueguang. Thus, he was currently seriously injured and had yet to fully recover. However, in order to frighten Xiao Ran, he could only forcefully feign a fully recovered appearance in front of everyone. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to one's wishes. Xiao Ran didn't care at all. He didn't hesitate to issue a challenge right from the start. Meng Tong, what is this fellow dilly-dallying for? Isn't this Xiao Ranlin Yi's little brother? Isn't it good to take advantage of this opportunity to deal with him? Su Lingchong looked at Meng Tong's cowardly behavior and couldn't help but frown. Although Meng Tong wasn't worthy of young Master Su's attention, he was still Meng Jueguang's underling and could be considered as one of his subordinates. But now he was even cowering in front of Xiao Ran, a mere underling of Lin Yi's. It was simply improper. Because he hadn't been to the Welcome Pavilion recently, and because he didn't care about a small fry like Xiao Ran, Su Lingchong didn't carefully observe Xiao Ran's strength. He didn't know that Xiao Ran was already an early-stage foundation establishment realm expert. Young Master Su didn't know that Meng Tong was an early-stage foundation establishment realm expert, but he was already so weak that he had been injured twice in a row. Now he was fighting with a body full of serious injuries. With his current state, not to mention facing Xiao Ran, an expert of the same level. Even if Cha Wu, who was publicly recognized as weak, went up against him, he could easily beat him to his knees. Meng Jueguang heard this and immediately felt awkward. He couldn't say a word for a long time, and he was speechless. You have to know, Su Lingchong had high hopes for him. Recently, he had already begun to build up support for him in the upper echelons of the 3 pavilions, paving the way for him to take over as the 3rd pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion. If he told him at this time that not only did he fail to deal with Lin Yi, but he was also continuously slapped in the face by 2 of Lin Yi's underlings, how could he continue to mingle in front of young Master Su? Just as Meng Jueguang didn't know how to explain it to young Master Su, under the referee's announcement, the duel on the stage had already officially begun. But this was a duel between 2 early-stage foundation establishment realm experts. However, it ended rather quickly, because with Meng Tong's current state, he didn't dare to make a move against Xiao Ran. After all, their positions were naturally hostile, and they had an unpleasant experience in the first round. He was afraid that Xiao Ran would take the opportunity to take revenge, or even directly kill him. So before the referee's voice fell, he still hurriedly raised his hand and shouted, "I admit defeat! I admit defeat!" The audience immediately went into an uproar. A familiar situation had already happened in the first round. At that time it was also him and Xiao Ran, but the one who took the initiative to admit defeat was Xiao Ran. But now, only a short period of 4 rounds had passed, and the situation was completely reversed. What kind of ironic retribution was this? For Xiao Ran, this match could be said to be exhilarating. He forced Meng Tong, the so-called boss of the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, to take the initiative to admit defeat. This was something that no one had ever done before, and he had thoroughly vented the resentment of the first round. However, for Meng Tong, this time he didn't feel so good. Clearly, a few rounds ago, this guy could only cower, and didn't even have the courage to face him. Now, in the blink of an eye, he was riding on top of his head, and even forced to take the initiative to admit defeat. Who could understand this kind of depression to the point of death? More importantly, in this round, young Master Su happened to be present. This was his backer's backer. This wasn't just shameful, it was practically killing him. And just when the audience was in an uproar, young Master Su, who was watching the match, heard Meng Tong's words, and his face instantly turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Meng Jueguang, who was beside him, couldn't help but cover his face. Although Meng Jueguang knew that this time, Meng Tong was forced to make this choice. Young Master Su didn't know the whole story. To be honest, although he brought Yuja here for other matters, he was also looking forward to seeing Lin Yi and his gang's misfortune. After all, he also brought along Shanghai Laner, the young lady who was nominally displeased with Lin Yi. Along the way, she swore that she would definitely make Lin Yi unlucky. And from the perspective of the newcomer challenge, it was just right. After all, even if they didn't see the boss, Lin Yi being unlucky, seeing his underlings being crushed by Meng Tong was also a kind of pleasure for them. In the end, this guy, Meng Tong, didn't do anything on the stage. As soon as he came up, he directly admitted defeat without saying a word. This was F*King giving young Master Su a slap in the face in front of everyone. And it was a slap that shook the heavens. Looking at young Master Su's gloomy face for a long time without saying a word, with an expression that looked like he wanted to kill someone, Shanghai Laner, who was beside him, couldn't help but grin and hold back her laughter. Chapter 3808. Young Master Su, Old Meng, have lost face because of my incompetence. But can you listen to my explanation? I have my own difficulties. Looking at young Master Su's gloomy expression, Meng Jueguang hurriedly pleaded for leniency. He was afraid that Su Lingchong would leave in a fit of rage and put him on the blacklist. If that happened, there would be no hope for him at all. Even the position of the third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion that he was about to obtain would become a wasted effort. Su Lingchong was silent for a while with a gloomy face. He glanced at Meng Tong, who was trembling with fear and almost peeing his pants. He then turned his head and said in a deep voice, "Speak, I'm listening." Yes, young Master Su, you may not know, but recently Lin Yi's underlings Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai both succeeded in building their foundations for some unknown reason. Meng Jueguang carefully explained. And there's such a thing. Su Lingchong originally thought that Meng Jueguang would find some excuse to brush him off, but he didn't expect such a shocking piece of news. For a newcomer, wanting to build his foundation in such a short period of time was easier said than done. It must be known that the reason why Kong Mingming and the others were able to successfully build their foundation so early was entirely because of him. Otherwise, if they didn't have the foundation elixir along with the foundation elixir, they wouldn't even have the courage to try. On the other hand, Lin Yi's group, on the other hand, couldn't even get one for each of them, let alone a foundation elixir. Plus, the mountain behind them was filled with poor people like Lu Bianren, and there was no way for them to get any elixirs at all. Since that was the case, how could they succeed in building their foundation? If this happened to Lin, it was just a special case. Then now even the two underlings, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, had succeeded in building their foundation. This was really confusing. Su Lingchong was confused, so he could only continue to listen to Meng Jueguang patiently. Meng Jueguang obviously couldn't give any reasonable explanation, so he could only tell young Master Su everything that happened in these few rounds in detail. Regarding these things, Shanghai Laner and Little Curly Bear also listened with great interest. Although Lin Yi didn't personally participate in these things, but listening to Lin Yi's underlings and Meng Tong's battle of wits and courage was actually quite interesting. Strictly speaking, Lin Yi was Shangguan Laner's junior, so Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai could naturally be considered as the underlings of Miss Shangguan's underlings, and Meng Tong was the underling of Su Lingchong, this annoying underling. Then, wasn't these things that Meng Jueguang said equivalent to the invisible confrontation between her and Su Lingchong? One must know. The degree of Shanghai Laner's hatred for Su Lingchong, this hypocritical young master, was not a little bit. Over the years, she had been annoyed by this annoying person, but because of the relationship between their elders, she couldn't completely ignore it. Over time, she accumulated a lot of resentment. So, at this moment, listening to these things, there was no need to mention how great it was to vent her anger. Just as Meng Jueguang was racking his brains to explain to young Master Su. On the contrary, Lin Yi's group looked relaxed at the moment. talking and laughing wittily. Mang Tong took the initiative to surrender as soon as he came up. Although this result was somewhat out of their expectations, it was also reasonable. After all, the 4th grade Recover pill was not an ordinary pill that could be found on the street. Previously, Meng Jiuguang was able to get 2 pills for him was already the limit. If they were to smash Meng Tong's body like a bottomless pit, not to mention that Meng Jiuguang couldn't bear it, even Su Lingchong, a young master with a deep background, might not be willing to grit his teeth and spend such a big capital. Boss, you see, Meng Jiuguang and Meng Tong, these 2 idiots, are always swaggering around in front of us. But now that Su Lingchong came, they immediately shrunk back. Look at the 2 of them. They don't even dare to breathe loudly. They are so king scared. Xiao Hongkai laughed and gloated. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh and said, "He who asked them to make trouble for young master Su the moment they came up. It's rare to come to the welcoming pavilion, but in the end, they saw Meng Tong surrender to our Xiao Ran. If I were him, I'm afraid that I would also be depressed. Of course, this little bit of anger can only be released on Meng Jiuguang's little brothers." The bitter senior and Xiao Ran looked at each other and laughed. It was rare to see Meng Jiuguang and Meng Tong being defeated like this. Even if they were honest and kind people, they couldn't help but feel refreshed and satisfied. It's a pity that Meng Tong is probably scared out of his wits. I was originally waiting for him to challenge me and then fight to the death with him to see whether his 1,000 legs or my cold iron palm is stronger. Unfortunately, I'm afraid I won't be able to wait for this opportunity today. After a few jokes, Xiao Hongkai shook her head with a regretful expression. Lin Yi heard her words and couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "Forget it. You should hurry up and challenge to earn points. This is what you should do now. As for dealing with Meng Tong, I promise you that there will be more opportunities like this in the future." "All right, I'll listen to you, boss." Xiao Hongkai nodded. Then, under everyone's gaze, he turned around and walked into the ring. As one of the 4 great early-stage foundational stage experts in Blue Cloud Pavilion, and having fought 2 consecutive rounds with Meng Tong, Xiao Hongkai had completely taken off the title of trash. He was no longer just a lackey under Lin Yi, but a real man of the moment. Now, in Blue Cloud Pavilion, no one dared to look down on him. On the contrary, when they thought of this guy's fierce performance in fighting 2 rounds with Meng Tong, everyone couldn't help but feel their scalp tingle. They didn't even dare to look him in the eye, afraid that he would misunderstand it as a provocation and target them. If that happened, even if they wanted to cry, they wouldn't be able to. According to the principle of maximizing points, Xiao Hongkai's next challenge was naturally to challenge the cave number 11 at the foot of the mountain, which was ranked above him. There was no suspense in the outcome of this battle. Finishing the battle in 1 move, Xiao Hongkai easily obtained his points. Then, under everyone's respectful gazes, he calmly walked off the stage. Looking at such a disgusting scene and listening to the nonsense Meng Jiuguang said, young master Su's expression was completely dark. He never thought that, in the short period of time he didn't pay attention to this place, so many unforeseen events had happened. Moreover, they were unforeseen events that made him lose face. Chapter 3809. Although, strictly speaking, these matters couldn't be blamed on him being useless. No one could have expected that Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, these 2 small fries, would actually be able to counterattack and succeed in building their foundations at the same time. But in the end, he could only blame himself for not doing his job well. As a dignified steward senior brother, he couldn't even deal with 2 small fries under Lin Yi. This was a fact that couldn't be covered up no matter how he tried to find an excuse. Meng Jiuguang felt ashamed and flustered, and didn't dare to find any excuse to shirk the responsibility in front of young Master Su. Based on Meng Jiuguang's many years of experience, the best way to deal with this situation was to pretend to be sincere and ashamed and prepare to be scolded. There was no need to say anything else, because anything else would be superfluous. This young master Su in front of him was truly a smart person. Any action of shirking responsibility in front of him was a stupid act of thinking oneself clever. The more one spoke, the more wrong one would be. It was better to put on a good attitude and at least leave a good impression of being pragmatic. Sure enough, after a moment of silence, Su Lingchong opened his mouth and said, "All right, I roughly understand the situation. This matter can't be blamed on you, old Meng. After all, the other side's two small fries suddenly succeeded in building their foundations. This kind of thing is unexpected. Furthermore, it's normal for just one Meng Tong to be unable to handle it. You don't need to blame yourself too much." After all, Su Lingchong wasn't an ordinary hedonistic young master. His shrewdness and tolerance were far beyond that of ordinary people. Once a person like Meng Jueguang entered his eyes, as long as he didn't make a mistake on the crucial issue of loyalty, he could completely tolerate this kind of small mistake. Because only by doing this could he create an image of being open-minded and open-minded. In the future, there would also be more people who would rely on him and willingly sell their lives for him. Moreover, this time, Meng Jueguang could indeed be considered pardonable. If he, Su Lingchong, didn't let it go, then it would seem like he had no tolerance. Not only would it not help the situation, it would also easily ruin his reputation. The loss outweighed the gain. Thank you for your understanding, young Master Su. Old Meng, I won't say any more hypocritical words of flattery. Young Master Su, please watch my performance in the future. I will do my best and not disappoint young Master Su. Meng Jueguang said with a face full of gratitude. Su Lingchong obviously enjoyed this very much. It was rare for him to put down his status, and he reached out to pat Meng Jueguang's shoulder. All right, old Meng, this young master has seen your loyalty. Work hard in the future, and this young master will absolutely not treat you unfairly. Looking at the master and servant duo's performance, Shanghai Laner couldn't help but secretly curl her lips. Even if she was inexperienced, she could still feel the artificiality in this. Indeed, birds of a feather flock together. These people are really hypocritical to the extreme. They can't be compared to my little junior brother Lin Yi. Little did they know that this was Su Lingchong deliberately pulling Meng Jueguang to put on a show. His vision was not limited to the mere welcome pavilion Lin Yi. He did this completely to create an image of himself as a wise young master. He wanted to spread his reputation through the mouths of the people present and pave the way for him to take over the Su family in the future. The master and the servant acted for a long time. Seeing that the audience was already talking about it, it seemed that the effect was almost there. Only then did they stop with satisfaction. Speaking of which, in this situation, old Meng, what do you think we should do? We can't let Lin Yi and his lackeys be so arrogant and presumptuous, right? Otherwise, if this goes on, where will I put my face? Where would I put my face then? Su Lingchong opened his mouth to ask. Although he himself was a smart person, his focus had always been on the top, and he would not waste too much energy on a small figure like Lin. If he had to do everything by himself, then what was the point of having a subordinate like Meng Jueguang? Young Master Su felt that what he had to do as the master was to be Meng Jueguang's backing, help him solve some things that he couldn't solve, and then let Meng Jueguang do it. To deal with a small figure like Lin Yi, Meng Jueguang was completely enough. Meng Jueguang had been waiting for Su Lingchong's words for a long time. Hearing this, he immediately replied, Young Master Su, in the current situation, although Lin Yi and the others are a bit too big to get rid of, in my opinion, the way to deal with them is actually very simple. As long as we take back the initiative in terms of strength, all other problems will naturally be solved. Oh, old Meng, how do you want to take back the initiative? Su Lingchong frowned slightly. Of course. He knew that the strength that Meng Jueguang mentioned here referred to the strength of the newcomers under him. After all, if he didn't want to take risks, he could only deal with Lin Yi and the others through this group of newcomers. Lin Yi and the others were now already in the early stage of foundation establishment. On the other hand, among the newcomers under Meng Jueguang, there was only Meng Tong. In comparison, it seemed too weak. However, if he wanted the other newcomers under Meng Jueguang to break through to the foundation establishment stage as soon as possible, not to mention that it would require a lot of medicinal pills and resources, the key was that with so many resources invested, there might not be any results. This was because even Meng Jueguang, the big senior brother in charge, could not guarantee the loyalty of so many newcomers. Moreover, it was unknown how many of these newcomers could successfully break through. At that time, when they faced Lin Yi and the others, they might not be able to gain an advantage, and the effect would not be great. Meng Jueguang had already considered this, so he immediately said, "Young Master Su, no matter how many resources are distributed to more people, it may not have an immediate effect. However, if they are concentrated on Meng Tong and let his strength rise to the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, what do you think?" Hearing this, Su Lingchong's eyes suddenly lit up. "Not bad, not bad. As long as we let Meng Tong regain an overwhelming advantage in strength, then no matter how many early-stage foundation establishment cultivators Lin Yi and the others toss about, it will be useless. Old Meng, your idea is not bad." However, after a pause, Su Lingchong immediately shook his head and said, "However, although what you said is right, if I remember correctly, Meng Tong just broke through to the foundation establishment stage last month, and he even took the foundation establishment pill and the foundation establishment liquid. If you want him to reach the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment in a short period of time, it is easier said than done." At the side, Meng Tong was originally overjoyed, thinking that he could get a lot of benefits this time. However, now that he heard Su Lingchong's words, his heart immediately sank to the bottom. Now that even young Master Su said so, wouldn't his grand wish of breaking through to the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment in a short period of time to find Lin Yi and the others for revenge become a daydream? Chapter 38:10. Meng Jueguang's words were quite emotional, and it could even be said that his voice was tearful. Even a smart person like Su Lingchong was somewhat bewitched for a moment. The meaning of Meng Jueguang's words couldn't be clearer. If they wanted to deal with Lin Yi, this was the only way out. They had to throw resources at Meng Tong so that he could reach the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm as soon as possible and regain their advantage in terms of strength and rank. Otherwise, they could only watch helplessly as Lin Yi and his gang continued to be arrogant. At that time, not only would their subordinates lose face, but more importantly, Su Lingchong, the young master, would lose face as well. If they couldn't even deal with Lin Yi, a mere newcomer in the secular world, then how could they talk about their great ambitions in the future? But how could it be easy to quickly raise Meng Tong, an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, to the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm? If this guy's strength was profound and he had already touched the barrier between the early stage of the foundation establishment realm and the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, then it would be fine. After all, this was only a matter of a foundation-breaking pill, so young Master Su had no reason to hesitate. The problem was that this guy had only been in the foundation establishment realm for less than a month, and he didn't even rely on his own strength. Instead, he relied on the foundation-building pill and the foundation-building liquid to forcibly build his foundation. It could be said that the foundation of this guy, Meng Tong, was even worse than other experts in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been defeated twice by Qiao Honkai, who had only been in the foundation establishment realm for a few days. The martial arts technique that he cultivated, Thousand Kicks, could theoretically give him a lot of advantage against experts in the same level as him against Qiao Hongsai's cold iron palm. However, he still could only fight to a draw with Qiao Honkai twice. This in itself was already very telling. To forcefully raise such a weak expert in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, even with young Master Su's background. It wasn't to the extent that he didn't have any means to do so. However, the resources that would be consumed was not something that a mere foundation-breaking pill could compare to. If the pill resources here were converted into spiritual medicine, it was definitely not as simple as a few hundred spirit jades, but at least 1,000 spirit jades. Such an enormous price was something that even a young master like Su Lingchong, who possessed an exceedingly deep background, would absolutely feel heartache to the point of spitting blood once he spent it. Moreover, if he really had such a powerful pill that could forcefully raise a person's level, why didn't he keep it for his own use? Why did he give it to Meng Tong, who wasn't even a trusted aide? But looking at the eager expressions of Meng Jueguang and the rest, Su Lingchong was, after all, a young master of a region. He still felt a little embarrassed. After all, what Meng Jueguang said was the truth. If he didn't think of a way to quickly raise Meng Tong's strength, then it would be very difficult to punish Lin Yi's group of idiots who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. In the face of absolute strength, no matter how clever Meng Jueguang was, in the end, he still couldn't replace Meng Tong. No matter how ingenious the plan was, in the end, not to mention Lin Yi himself, even his 2 subordinates might not be able to handle it. What else could he do? And if it wasn't a last resort, Su Lingchong didn't want to take the unorthodox path of assassinating Lin Yi. Even if this method was simple and direct, it would still leave behind something that could be used against him. If the people from the law enforcement hall were to sniff out any clues, then he, young Master Su, would be finished for the rest of his life. Before the core interests were involved, it was obviously not worth it for Su Lingchong to take such a risk to deal with a mere Lin Yi. The most realistic and reliable way was to let Meng Jueguang deal with him. After hesitating for a long time, Su Lingchong glanced at the pitiful Meng Tong. Then he turned to Meng Jueguang and said, with Meng Tong's current conditions, if we want to forcibly raise his level, ordinary elixirs are definitely not enough. If we really want to do this, I think we can only try some unorthodox methods. What do you think, old Meng? Unorthodox methods? Meng Jueguang was stunned. Then he nodded repeatedly and said, Young Master Su is wise. Old Meng actually thinks so too. If it's ordinary elixirs, it's impossible to achieve the effect we need. Meng Tong was confused as he listened to the conversation between the two. He simply didn't know what the so-called unorthodox methods were. He only knew that young Master Su seemed to have agreed, and he was secretly delighted in his heart. Little did he know that anything that was called an unorthodox method meant that it wasn't an ordinary path. As everyone knew, when it came to cultivation, no matter how careful one was, one step would mean that every step would be wrong. The risks involved were not to be trifled with. In fact, whether it was Su Lingchong or Meng Jueguang, they were both well aware of this. With young Master Su's background, if he really wanted to help Meng Tong raise his level at all costs, there were definitely more reliable ways. For example, Lin Yi's method of using the Foundation Establishment Pill and the Foundation Establishment Barrier-Breaking Pill. This kind of elixir combination could not only raise one's strength in a short period of time, but also had no side effects. Even if it failed, there would be no danger. Although young Master Su might not be able to get his hands on the Foundation Establishment Pill, he also had a way to get other elixirs to replace it. It was just that each of these elixirs was incomparably precious. Even if he spent thousands of spiritual jades, he might not be able to buy them. Even if young Master Su had them on hand, it was impossible for him to give them to Meng Tong. Moreover, even if young Master Su was truly righteous and generous to the point that he was willing to take out a pill of this level, it was absolutely impossible for it to fall into Meng Tong's hands. In the middle, Meng Jueguang would have already reached out and snatched it away. How could he leave it for such a foolish trash like Meng Tong? There was never a free lunch in the sky. Meng Tong actually foolishly believed in young Master Su and Meng Jueguang. He believed that these two people would really give him such great benefits. It could only be said that he was really blind. Seeing that Meng Jueguang had no objection, young Master Su directly ignored Meng Tong's reaction and immediately said, "Then let's do it this way. I happen to have a meridian heart-breaking pill in my collection. It was given to me by a senior alchemist a few years ago. As long as it is used well, it is enough to raise a level. It doesn't matter how poor the foundation is." It turns out to be the meridian heart-breaking pill. Meng Jueguang's eyelids couldn't help but twitch when he heard this. He had also heard about this elixir by chance. It was a kind of extremely heaven-defying elixir, but at the same time it also made people shudder. Chapter 38:11. What did it feel like to have your heart broken? No one knew, because once the heart was broken, even the strongest practitioner would die without a doubt. However, ever since the meridian heart-shattering pill was invented, it forced living people to experience the pain of a broken heart that was worse than death. Once consumed, before breaking through to the next level, they could only endure the pain. If they were stuck there for the rest of their lives, they would only be freed when they died. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the meridian heart-shattering pill was a pill that tormented oneself. No matter how miraculous its effects were, no one dared to use it because of the strong side effects. Once consumed, the consequences would be unimaginable. The person who created this elixir was a genius elixir refiner, and it was said that he was extremely talented, even on par with the current miracle Dr. Zhang Liju. But different from Zhang Liju, this genius elixir refiner had never been recognized by the mainstream of the practitioner's world. Because he created all sorts of unorthodox recipes, he was classified as an evil practitioner and was hunted by the righteous sections. All he could do was hide from them, until one day his wife, who he had been relying on for survival, was surrounded and killed by cultivators of the righteous sections. Due to his lack of strength, he could only watch helplessly as his wife died. From that day onwards, this genius alchemist officially joined the evil cultivator's camp. In order to remind him not to forget the humiliation he had suffered, and at the same time to quickly improve his strength, the meridian heart-shattering pill was created. However, although the effects of the meridian heart-shattering pill were heaven-defying and its side effects were shocking, because the pill formula was rarely circulated on the market and there were very few alchemists who could refine it, its reputation was far from matching its heaven-defying effects. It was only circulated among a very small number of alchemists and well-informed people. If it wasn't for luck, even someone as experienced as Meng Jueguang wouldn't have heard of it, much less a newbie like Meng Tong. Even now, Meng Tong was still completely unaware of the hidden danger in this place. He was even daydreaming about it. The name meridian heart-shattering pill sounded like something incredible. Could it be that after using this pill, he would be able to shatter someone's heart with just a wave of his hand? More importantly, it could forcibly raise one's strength by a level. What an amazing pill! Old Meng, it shouldn't be a problem to give this meridian heart-shattering pill to Meng Tong, right? Su Lingchong asked again. He was well aware of the side effects of the meridian heart-shattering pill, so even though he knew that this pill was very rare, he didn't feel bad about it. After all, he definitely wouldn't use it himself. It could only be a collector's item in his hands. If he could use it to deal with Lin, that would be making the best use of everything. As for whether or not Meng Tong's life would be ruined after taking it, that was not within his scope of consideration. In the end, trash like Meng Tong was nothing in his eyes. He couldn't even be considered an underling. At best, he was just a chess piece. Since he was a chess piece, he naturally didn't need to consider anything like human rights. After using him, if he was destroyed, then so be it. He could just find another one. However, Meng Jueguang was different. Not only was Meng Tong his underling, but they were also relatives. If he watched Meng Tong jump into the fire pit without saying a word, then not only would he be blamed by Meng Tong in the future, he would also be too ashamed to face anyone when he returned home. Young Master Su still valued Meng Jueguang, so at this time he still had to ask for Meng Jueguang's opinion. Meng Jueguang couldn't help but hesitate. Even if Meng Tong was his relative, Meng Tong was still his most loyal underling. No matter how black-bellied Meng Jueguang was, he still had to consider his own reputation. After all, if even Meng Tong was tricked by him, then if this matter was spread out, who would be willing to work for him, Meng Jueguang? However, while Meng Jueguang was hesitating, Meng Tong, who didn't know what was going on, jumped out impatiently and volunteered. Young Master Su, I can do it! I won't let young Master Su down. Ninth cousin brother, say something. At the same time, Meng Tong secretly tugged on Meng Jueguang's sleeves, hinting him to quickly agree. Meng Jueguang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The saying that the ignorant are fearless is true. It was rare for him to be kind and hesitate for a while, but in the end, Meng Tong was rushing into the fire pit himself. He couldn't even stop him. And looking at this situation, if he didn't quickly agree on his behalf, he might even think that he was blocking his way, and he would bear a grudge for no reason. In desperation, Meng Jueguang could only nod at Su Lingchong and said, "Thank you, young Master Su, for your generous reward." "Thank you, young Master Su, for your generous reward." Meng Tong also hurriedly expressed his gratitude, his face full of joy. Seeing this, Meng Jueguang could only shake his head speechlessly, although he also knew that as long as he explained the stakes clearly to Meng Tong, no matter how brainless Meng Tong was, he would definitely not rush to take this elixir. But how could he say it in this situation, disregarding everything else? Just the fact that young Master Su was glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey made it difficult for Meng Jueguang to explain in detail. After all, young Master Su had brought up the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill because they had asked for it. If they were to be picky and refuse to cooperate, then where would young Master Su put his face? On one hand, Meng Tong, this idiot, was rushing to jump into the fire pit, and on the other hand, he still had to take into account young Master Su's face. So, for Meng Jueguang, taking advantage of the situation and agreeing was the only choice he could make. As for whether Meng Tong would bear a grudge in the future, this was no longer in the scope of Meng Jueguang's consideration. Who asked this guy to rush into it? This was all Meng Tong's own idea. Meng Jueguang never said a single word of instigation. At that time, even if someone wanted to blame someone, it wouldn't be his head. Okay, then let's do it this way. I'll go back and look for it. After 2 days, I'll ask someone to send this Meridian Heart-Shattering elixir over. Old Meng, you also help Meng Tong prepare well. The effect of this elixir is heaven-defying, which means that the medicinal effect is very overbearing. If we don't make thorough preparations in advance, it might be dangerous. Su Lingchong instructed. Chapter 38:12. For an unorthodox pill, like the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill, one had to be even more careful when taking it. Ignoring one's foundation and forcibly increasing one's strength by 1 level. What kind of concept was that? Even if it was the Foundation Establishment Pill, its effect could only let Lin Yi touch the barrier of the early stage of Foundation establishment in advance, but it could not let him become an expert of the early stage of Foundation establishment in one go. From this aspect, the effect of the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill was even higher than the Foundation Establishment Pill, even without considering the side effects of the heartbreaking pain. Just based on the overbearing effect of increasing one's strength, one could think of the hidden risks in it, even with one's toes. What's more, Meng Tong's current state was that he had yet to recover from his serious injuries. If he didn't make any preparations and just let him take it for free, let alone advance to the early stage of Foundation establishment, he probably wouldn't even be able to feel the heartbreaking pain and would have to report to the underworld directly. Although Meng Tong didn't have much of a brain, he still had this bit of common sense. Hearing Su Lingchong's words, he thought that Su Lingchong was concerned about him, and immediately said gratefully, "Young Master Su, you really care about your subordinates too much. To be able to work under you is simply a blessing that can't be cultivated for several lifetimes." It was just that young Master Su didn't care about the life or death of Meng Tong. He only cared about whether the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill would go to waste. Although the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill's side effects were terrible, it was still a very rare pill, and its effect was indeed heaven-defying. Even if Su Lingchong didn't know how to take it himself, if it was wasted without any effect, he would still feel some heartache. Towards Meng Tong's brainless display of loyalty, Su Lingchong could only speechlessly roll his eyes. How could an idiot like you, who was cheated by others and still helped them with money, be worthy of being my subordinate? At most, you're just cannon fodder. Meng Jueguang could only smile awkwardly, looking at Meng Tong's eyes with pity and helplessness. He really didn't know what to say to such a brainless cousin. At this moment, Lin Yi and the others looked at Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang's group muttering nonstop. They couldn't help but feel suspicious. What the hell are these guys up to this time? This was a very natural connection. After all, young Master Su was Meng Jueguang's big backer. Now that Meng Jueguang saw that he couldn't do anything to them, the only choice left was to seek help from young Master Su. "Boss, why don't we make a guess? Let's see what these guys will do next." Qiao Hongkai didn't seem worried at all as he smiled at Lin Yi and the others. Recently, he was in a pretty good mood. Due to the 2 consecutive fights with Meng Tong, which resulted in both sides suffering heavy losses, he quickly adapted to the strength of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. His strength had completely stabilized. If he hadn't fought those 2 tough battles with Meng Tong, he wouldn't have been able to reach this level under normal circumstances. It would have taken at least half a month or even more than a month of bitter cultivation. But now he had accomplished it in just a few days. It would be strange if he was not in a good mood. Senior Brother Bitter smiled and said, "In my opinion, Senior Brother Meng and the others may want to get a few elixirs like the limit of the golden elixir. Senior Brother Meng and the others may want to get a few elixirs like the limit of the golden elixir. In the current situation, apart from elixirs like the limit of the golden elixir that can instantly increase strength, they can't do anything to these junior brothers with just Meng Tongi. The limit of the golden elixir could increase one's strength in a short period of time. In this way, even if they were all in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, it would be impossible for Qiao Hongkai to defeat Meng Tong, who had taken the limit of the golden elixir. Moreover, there was at least a 3-day buffer between each round of the challenge. As long as the plan was in place, they could completely avoid the weakness period of the limit of the golden elixir. In Senior Brother Bitter's understanding, this was already the best solution he could think of. In fact, it was indeed feasible, and the price was not high. It was only a limit of the golden elixir. Regarding Senior Brother Bitter's words, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai agreed. However, only Lin Yi shook his head thoughtfully. If it was only Meng Jueguang himself, it wouldn't be strange for him to use the limit of the golden elixir. But now even young Master Su Lingchong has appeared. If it's still limited to the limit of the golden elixir, it's too small of a fight. It doesn't seem like this young master's style. In my opinion, what they're plotting is definitely not as simple as a few rounds of the challenge. There must be some kind of higher level method. Lin Yi analyzed. Yes, that's right. Junior Brother Lin's words make more sense. Senior Brother Bitter and the others nodded in unison when they heard this. Indeed, as Lin Yi said, although Senior Brother Bitter's idea was reliable, it was only limited to Meng Jueguang's level. With Meng Jueguang's background, being able to help Meng Tong obtain the limit of the golden elixir was already considered to have done his best. However, he didn't consider that there was still young Master Su standing behind him. For a young master at Su Lingchong's level, the limit of the golden elixir was obviously too small of a deal. If it was just a discussion about a mere limit of the golden elixir, how could he discuss it with Meng Jueguang and the others for such a long time with his identity? Moreover, Lin Yi and the others clearly saw that Su Lingchong had hesitation in the beginning. To be able to make him, young Master Su, hesitate in his heart, what kind of big move was this? In that case, we have to guard against them in the future. Otherwise, even if Meng Tong can't deal with us, with this young Master Su and Meng Jueguang's crafty plots, it's also impossible to guard against them. Xiao Ran said with a solemn expression. Lin Yi nodded. Yes, but there's no need to worry too much. If soldiers come, we'll deal with them. In the end, strength is the way of the king. For the time being, Meng Jueguang only has Meng Tong, who is in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. This is a fact that no one can change. Hee, I actually hope that this scum, Meng Tong, will quickly eat some awesome medicinal pill before challenging me. Otherwise, with his pitiful courage, I reckon that he will never dare to challenge me again in this lifetime. Qiao Hongkai laughed. Although both sides were defeated twice in a row, for Qiao Hongkai, who had just succeeded in the foundation establishment realm a few days ago, and was at a great disadvantage in terms of martial skills, this was already the same as the weak defeating the strong. As for Meng Tong, who originally had the absolute upper hand, there was probably already a shadow in his heart. If there was no huge breakthrough in his strength, it would be very difficult for him to have the confidence to face Qiao Hongkai, and it was even more impossible for him to defeat Qiao Hongkai and wash away his previous shame. Just wait, I believe that they won't let you down. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Chapter 38:13. Putting aside the fact that his hidden strength wasn't something that someone like Meng Tong could compete with, just the fact that he had planted 2 spies, Li Jingming and Zhong Pingliang, was enough to give him the upper hand in many things. Naturally, he didn't have to worry too much about the so-called conspiracies. In the 5th round of the newcomer challenge, because of the arrival of Su Lingchong's group, every match was full of the smell of gunpowder, but there weren't too many twists and turns. In the end, Li Jingming defeated the challenger once again. As for Lin Yi, the publicly recognized #1 newcomer, he played an entire round of soy sauce. After the challenge ended, the newcomers dispersed. However, Li Jingming, who had just won a match and gained a lot of points, didn't look much better because of this. He didn't go back to his cave like the other newcomers, but went straight to find Meng Jueguang, his real support in name. Senior brother Meng, I have some ideas about Lin Yi's group. I don't know if I can report it to you, senior brother? Li Jingming deliberately squeezed out a smile and walked to Meng Jueguang's side. Oh, Jingming, what ideas do you have? Tell me. Hearing that it was related to Lin Yi, Meng Jueguang immediately became interested. However, Meng Tong, who was beside him, curled his lips in disdain. He's just a heaven stage, full cycle. What ideas can he have? It's just empty talk, a waste of time. Although Meng Tong had not recovered from his serious injuries, because of what happened just now, his spirit was completely different from before. He was completely immersed in the joy of becoming a peak early-stage foundation establishment master. A mere heaven stage, full cycle, like Li Jingming, was nothing to him. Hearing that, Li Jingming couldn't help but want to curse. Damn Meng Tong, if you didn't get the foundation elixir from Su Lingchong and use it together with the foundation elixir, do you think you can succeed in building your foundation? Come to think of it, during the trial in the back mountain, if I hadn't sacrificed my own elixirs and cooperated with you, you wouldn't even have been able to obtain this foundation establishment pill. Now, you actually have the face to mock me for being weak? This person is too shameless. However, Li Jingming suppressed his anger. Ignoring Meng Tong's sarcastic remarks, he turned to Meng Jueguang and said, Senior Marshal Brother Meng, you saw it too. Lin Yi's group already has 3 early-stage foundation-building cultivators, while we only have Boss Meng Tong. If this goes on, the overall gap will only grow bigger and bigger. So I think the most important thing right now is to do it. We need to find someone to share the burden with Boss Meng Tong. Only then can we block Lin Yi's attack and regain the initiative in the future." Hearing that, Meng Jueguang immediately fell silent. They were all smart people. Although Li Jingming didn't say it directly, his meaning was already very clear. He wanted to be like Meng Tong. Stand up and deal with Lin Yi's group. If it was just this simple hot-blooded idea, Meng Jueguang wouldn't be put in a difficult position. The key was that Li Jingming wasn't a brainless trash like Meng Tong. With his current strength of Heaven Stage, wanting to stand up and challenge Lin Yi's group of 3 early-stage foundation-building cultivators was simply a fool's talk. Moreover, he would absolutely not do that. The key point of Li Jingming's words was that he wanted to become the person who could share the burden with Meng Tong, and the prerequisite was naturally that he had that kind of strength. At the very least, he had to be an early-stage foundation-building expert. And if he wanted to break through to foundation building in a short period of time, then he must have the coordination of medicinal pills. Not to mention the foundation-building elixir, like Meng Tong did. At the very least, a foundation-building elixir was the most basic. This was what Meng Jueguang found difficult. In terms of strength and loyalty, in his opinion, Li Jingming was already qualified enough. Normally, giving him a foundation-building elixir wouldn't be a big deal. But the problem was that he didn't have a foundation-building elixir on hand. For a young master like Su Lingchong, a mere foundation-building elixir was nothing in his eyes. Even if it was foundation-building elixir that couldn't be bought in the market, he could get it with just a call. But for Meng Jueguang, this matter wasn't so easy to handle. Although he was the big brother in charge of the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion and was in charge of the distribution of the newcomers' benefits, it seemed like he had quite a bit of power, but the resources in his hands had never included the foundation-building elixir. One had to know that in the early years, due to the lack of resources, the Welcome Pavilion didn't even provide the foundation-building elixir to the newcomers. If the newcomers wanted to break through to foundation building, the biggest thing they relied on was the training cave and a bit of spirit jade. The foundation-building elixir, on the other hand, was a benefit that had only appeared in recent years, and the quantity was extremely limited. Usually, it would be left for the last few newcomers with the best performance. Until this year, due to the special care of the miracle Dr. Zhang Liju, who was far away in Middle Island, the amount of foundation-building elixir distributed to the Welcome Pavilion had increased exponentially. This was why the first month of the Back Mountain Trials was rewarded with foundation-building elixir. This was something unimaginable in previous years. But even so, with Meng Jueguang's position, he still couldn't interfere with the distribution of the foundation-building elixir. The reason was simple. He was only a senior disciple in charge of the Welcome Pavilion, and he was far from qualified. In the entire Welcome Pavilion, there were only 2 people who had the right to speak on the distribution of the foundation-building elixir. One was the head Hu Yunfeng, and the other was the vice head Feng Song. According to the rules, the third head had a certain amount of right to speak, but Liu Bianren had long since become a marginal character, and he was about to be kicked out, so naturally he wasn't considered. If it was said that Meng Jueguang had already replaced Liu Bianren as the third head, he would be able to interfere with the distribution of the foundation-building elixir out of respect for young Master Su. But unfortunately, he wasn't the third head yet. The distribution of the foundation-building elixir had nothing to do with him, and as a master who was about to break through to the middle phase of the foundation-building elixir, there was no way he would store elixirs that he couldn't use. What could he do? However, if Meng Jueguang just rejected Li Jingming's request and said that he couldn't do anything about it, it wouldn't make sense. This wasn't because he suddenly found his conscience, but because of all sorts of deeper concerns. Not only was it embarrassing to do this in front of his follower, but if word of this got out, it would be a huge blow to his reputation as the head senior disciple. After all, Li Jingming was the first new disciple under him, other than Meng Tong. Compared to the other new disciples, Li Jingming was obviously stronger, and it could be said that he was willing to work without complaint. Even if he didn't make any big contributions, at least he had put in blood, sweat, and tears. Chapter 38:14. Biased, useless, mean, ungrateful. Once these rumors spread, the hearts of the rookies under him would scatter. Once the hearts of the rookies were scattered, it would be difficult to gather them again. If even the rookies under him no longer took his word seriously, then what difference would there be between him, the so-called big senior brother in charge, and this kind of transparent, marginalized person? Meng Jueguang was very clear that even if he had already latched onto a big tree like Su Lingchong, if he wanted to be valued in the future, then he still needed to have enough strength. This strength did not only refer to himself, but also to the rookies under him. These people were the foundation for him to soar in the future. Therefore, Meng Jueguang could not just reject Li Jingming. Even if he did not have a foundation establishment pill, he would at least have to give a reasonable answer. After hesitating for a while, Meng Jueguang finally said hesitantly, "Jingming, I am very gratified that you have such intentions. However, it's a pity that I don't have a foundation establishment pill on hand right now. Otherwise, why would I need you to ask? I would have given it to you long ago, right?" Hearing this, Li Jingming's heart immediately sank. Although he had secretly become Lin Yi's spy, what he told Meng Jueguang about wanting to break through to foundation establishment was not a lie at all. As one of the top 5 rookies in Blue Cloud Pavilion, the other 4 were already early-stage foundation establishment experts. Only he, Li Jingming, was still struggling at Heaven Stage Great Circle. Moreover, he could not see any hope. This kind of feeling was really a kind of torture for him. Although he carried a blood feud and wanted to keep a low profile, this low profile also had a limit. If he, Li Jingming, watched helplessly as the people around him, whose talents were not as good as his, reached foundation establishment successfully, and he, Li Jingming, remained at Heaven Stage Great Circle without moving, then it would not be low profile, but idiotic. Therefore, Li Jingming really wanted to break through to foundation establishment. Moreover, he did not ask for much, just a foundation establishment pill. Logically speaking, Li Jingming was now Lin Yi's spy, and this kind of thing could be brought up to Lin Yi. However, he hadn't been on Lin Yi's side for long. Apart from sending a few letters of intelligence, he felt that he had not done anything for Lin Yi. He didn't have any outstanding achievements. Strictly speaking, when he first joined Lin Yi's side, he was forced to save his life after his sneak attack failed. It was not voluntary, so Lin Yi spared his life was already a great kindness. Therefore, he really did not have the face to ask Lin Yi for this. In contrast, the current situation happened to be that Lin Yi's group was in an absolute advantage, and Meng Jueguang also needed someone to stand up and share the pressure for him. Therefore, Li Jingming wanted to take this opportunity to ask Meng Jueguang. Looking at his past achievements, coupled with the current grim situation, Meng Jueguang should try to get him a foundation establishment pill. But unexpectedly, Meng Jueguang did not have this intention at all. Although he said that he did not have a foundation establishment pill, this sentence was very likely to be the truth. But if he did not have it, couldn't he think of a way? It must be known that Meng Tong, who was also a subordinate of this big senior brother, had consumed a large number of rare pills. Not to mention the foundation establishment pill, the foundation establishment liquid, and even the 4th grade Great Recover pill, which was known as a life-saving divine pill. Moreover, there were 2 of them. On Meng Tong, who was a piece of trash that couldn't even be supported by a wall, he was willing to invest such a large amount of his hard-earned capital. As for him, who was similarly loyal and devoted, or at least had been a loyal and devoted little brother before, he wasn't even willing to part with a single foundation establishment pill, favoring one and discriminating against the other. This kind of conduct really made one's heart go cold. Fortunately, back then, he was wise enough to secretly rely on boss Lin Yi as a spy. Otherwise, if he really wholeheartedly followed Meng Jueguang, this kind of trash, to rely on a mountain and work like a cow or a horse, then he, Li Jingming, would really be blind, walking down a dark path. Seeing Li Jingming's disappointed expression, Meng Jueguang also knew that his actions were somewhat unjustifiable. After thinking for a while, he then added, "However, although senior brother does not have a foundation establishment pill on hand, I have specially prepared 3 sets of elixir ingredients to refine the foundation establishment pill for you, Zhengming. When we return, I can give them to you, as long as you find an alchemist to help you, not to mention 1 foundation establishment pill. Even 3 foundation establishment pills will be fine. I guarantee that it will be enough for you to break through to the foundation establishment stage." Li Jingming was stunned. At first, he thought that it was rare for Meng Jueguang to find his conscience, but in the end, it was actually to give him the ingredients and let him find an alchemist to refine the foundation establishment pill himself. Are you King kidding me? Although the foundation establishment pill was an extremely rare pill for a heaven stage great circle expert like him, strictly speaking, it could not be considered rare at all. The elixir ingredients needed to refine the foundation establishment pill were basically some common goods. A set of foundation establishment pill ingredients, even if measured by the market price, would at most be worth 3 or 4 pieces of spiritual jade. 3 sets of foundation establishment pill ingredients added together, at most, would be worth the price of 10 pieces of spiritual jade. In other words, Meng Jueguang would at most be willing to spend 10 pieces of spiritual jade on him, Li Jingming. Wanting him to invest more than this, there was no way. Even Meng Jueguang was not willing to even take out 10 pieces of spiritual jade, although his words sounded very nice, saying that it was specially prepared for Li Jingming. But common goods like the foundation establishment pill ingredients did not need to be specially prepared at all. Any cultivator with a little bit of background, after unconsciously accumulating in the past, would be able to casually dig out a few sets of these elixir ingredients from their personal storage. At the end of the day, these elixir ingredients were simply dispensable goods to Meng Jueguang. They were thrown into a corner, trash that he would normally not even bother to take a look at. But now he took advantage of the situation and said that they were elixir ingredients that were specially prepared for Li Jingming. If it was not for the fact that he had been carrying a blood feud for so many years and had trained a body of extraordinary forbearance, Li Jingming would have directly scolded out loud. "You, Meng Jueguang, do you have to trick your own people like this?" If he directly shook his head and refused, even if he was mean and ungrateful, at least it could be said to be open and above board. In the end, Meng Jueguang not only did not want to give him the foundation establishment pill, but also had to worry about his reputation. So he stubbornly used these elixir ingredients that even he himself looked down upon to deceive him, and even made it seem like he was very magnanimous and considerate of his subordinates. What did it mean to be a whore and also to have a chastity? This was it. Before Li Jingming could say anything, Meng Tong, who was at the side, jumped up in shock. *CK. 3 sets of foundation establishment pill ingredients. This was 3 building foundation, Don. 9th cousin brother, you are too biased. You have never given me so much before. Chapter 38:15. Li Jingming's face darkened even further. A perfectly reasonable and legitimate request was casually duped by someone else with some scraps. How could this be considered as taking advantage of others and being secretly happy? If it was Meng Tong, you'd better show me how happy you are. 3 sets of foundation building pill materials, in theory, were indeed enough to refine 3 foundation building pills. It was also enough for him, Li Jingming, to break through to foundation building realm. But the problem was, as a mere newcomer in Blue Cloud Pavilion, where would he find the financial resources to find a pill master to help refine it? At the pill hall, no matter what kind of pill was refined, other than needing to provide the materials himself, there was another basic condition, which was to hand over 200 spiritual jades. One had to know that even senior brother Ku Bai, who had many years of savings, couldn't meet this condition, let alone Li Jingming, a mere heaven-stage Great Circle newcomer? The greatest value of a pill wasn't in the materials, but in the refining process, not to mention 3 sets of materials. Even if it was 5 or 8 sets, no pill master could guarantee that they could definitely refine one foundation-building pill. Putting aside the pill hall, if he wanted to go to the city square to buy a foundation establishment pill, it would cost at least 250 spirit jades. He, Li Jingming, simply did not have this purchasing power. In other words, the 3 sets of foundation-building pill materials that Meng Jueguang gave him were completely useless. Meng Jueguang must have completely expected this result, but he still had to pretend to be a good person here. Looking at Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong's faces, thinking about how blind he was to sell his life for these kinds of people, Li Jingming simply felt disgusted from the bottom of his heart. Then thank you, Senior Brother Meng, for your concern. Li Jingming could only forcefully suppress his sullen depression and feign civility with the other party. Meng Jueguang chuckled. Jingming, it's good that you can understand my painstaking efforts. I'm very gratified. Work hard in the future. I definitely won't mistreat you. Of course, I definitely won't disappoint Senior Brother Meng's expectations. The corner of Li Jingming's mouth twitched unconsciously. How stupid must I be to believe Meng Jueguang's bullshit that he wouldn't mistreat me? Now that things had come to this, he had completely lost hope in Meng Jueguang. If not for the fact that he wanted to continue working as a mole for Lin Yi. He even had the intention to fall out with the other party in front of everyone. Fortunately, his forbearance was far above that of an ordinary person. No matter how disgusted he felt, he would not let it go. He could also continue to endure it. In addition to the consideration of continuing to be a spy for Lin Yi, what Meng Tong said just now also made him very concerned. Meng Tong actually said that he was about to advance a step further. Just now, when Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang were talking, they purposely found a remote corner. Even Li Jingming couldn't get too close, so he didn't know what these people were planning. However, he could already be sure that what these people were talking about was definitely related to the words that Meng Tong blurted out just now. As for Meng Tong's casual words, if one carefully pondered over them, there was a great mystery hidden in this. Meng Tong had just built his foundation not long ago. Furthermore, he relied on the foundation-building elixir and foundation-building elixir to barely succeed. Logically speaking, with his foundation, he wouldn't be able to advance a step further within a few years. But this guy actually shouted out such words now. And judging from this tone, these words shouldn't be Meng Tong's daydreaming. It was real and practical. Then the biggest possibility was that Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang had reached some kind of agreement in private. And to be able to let Meng Tong advance a step further in a short period of time, it could be seen that young Master Su was preparing to pay a big price again. Although with Li Jingming's vision, it was hard to imagine anything that could let Meng Tong, this kind of trash with a weak foundation, advance a step further in a short period of time. There was no doubt about this information. It had to be revealed to Boss Lin Yi as soon as possible, so that they could prepare early. Li Jingming knew that with Lin Yi's hidden strength at the peak of the early stage of foundation building, even if Meng Tong was able to advance a step further, it was still impossible for him to pose any substantial threat to him. However, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai were different. Although the two of them were already in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, if they were to face Meng Tong, who was at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, it would be very bad for them. After receiving 3 sets of foundation-building elixir materials from Meng Jueguang, late that night, Li Jingming took advantage of the fact that there was no one in the surroundings and went to Lin Yi's cave number 1 at the foot of the mountain. Jingming, why did you come personally? Seeing Li Jingming appear at the entrance of his cave, Lin Yi couldn't help but be astonished, and then immediately led him into the cave. As Lin Yi's spy, in order to ensure his concealment and safety, Under normal circumstances, Li Jingming had to avoid any contact with Lin Yi. Even if he wanted to pass on information, it would be through secret codes and notes, and absolutely not face-to-face communication. After all, no matter what, Meng Jueguang could be considered a cunning old fox. Moreover, with so many new Blue Cloud Pavilion members under his command, he had many eyes and ears. No matter how careful Li Jingming was, once he came into contact with Lin Yi, it would be very easy for him to give himself away, and the outcome would be very hard to say. Since ancient times, traitors were always more hateful than enemies. Perhaps Meng Jueguang wouldn't do anything to Lin Yi's underlings like Xiao, Ran, and Xiao Honkai. But if he discovered that Li Jingming had betrayed him and become Lin Yi's spy, he might really take the risk and kill him out of desperation. However, the reason why Li Jingming took the risk to personally appear at Lin Yi's cave this time was because he had another purpose. Boss Lin Yi, I inadvertently found out some information from Meng Tong's words today, and I feel that I need to report it to you. Li Jingming's face was serious, and he immediately told everything that Meng Tong had said before, as well as his own analysis and conjecture to Lin Yi. There's actually such a thing? It seems that this young Master Su is really willing to invest this kind of capital on Meng Tong. He really thinks highly of me. After listening, Lin Yi couldn't help but be stunned and speechless. His analysis was exactly the same as Li Jingming's. Although he didn't know what kind of capital Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang were prepared to invest, one thing was certain, and that was, as Lin Yi had previously guessed, the other party couldn't hold back and was going to make a move. From Meng Tong's words, it could already eliminate the possibility that senior brother had previously speculated. What he meant was definitely not as simple as using the limit of the gold core to temporarily increase his strength, but to actually increase his strength from the early stage of the Foundation Establishment Realm to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment Realm. Chapter 38:16. No matter how much a trash like Meng Tong leveled up, he wouldn't be a threat to Lin Yi. However, he had to think about his underlings. If they were caught off guard and lost one of Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai, the loss would be unacceptable. Boss Lin, you're being too serious. This is all part of my responsibility. I don't deserve your thanks. Li Jingming was moved. As expected, comparisons were odious. Both of them were new bosses. But when comparing Lin Yi to Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong, the difference between them was like heaven and earth. You deserve it. If it weren't for your information, something might have happened to them. So, you don't have to be humble. I'll remember your contributions. Lin Yi smiled and patted Li Jingming. Li Jingming was touched. Then he blushed and said, "It's a pity that I didn't dare to continue probing with Meng Tong. Otherwise, with Meng Tong's arrogant and stupid behavior, it wouldn't be difficult to get the specific plan out of his mouth. It's fine. It's right that you didn't continue probing with him. Otherwise, with a sly old fox like Meng Jueguang watching from the side, it would be easy for him to see something fishy. There's no need to lose the big picture because of small things. After all, safety comes first." Lin Yi comforted him. Then he added, "Moreover, your information is enough for me." Lin Yi wasn't being arrogant. He was speaking the truth. He suddenly remembered that when Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang were discussing in private, Miss Shangguan was present the whole time. Whether it was Su Lingchong or Meng Jueguang, they were consciously avoiding the eyes and ears of others. Even their underlings like Li Jingming were not allowed to get close to them. However, they couldn't criticize Miss Shangguan. Shangguan Lanner's status was even higher than Su Lingchong's. In addition, she deliberately pretended to be at loggerheads with Lin Yi. Whenever she wanted to hear something, she wouldn't hesitate. Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang couldn't wait to please her. Why would they stop her? So, even if he couldn't find out the specific content of the plan from Li Jingming, since he was already aware of this, Lin Yi could find a suitable opportunity to ask Miss Shangguan about it. After saying that, Lin Yi suddenly slapped his forehead. Right, I've got nothing to do these 2 days, so I'm planning to start refining pills. Zheng Ming, you can go back and adjust yourself a bit. I'll give you 2 foundation pills when the time comes. Then I can start preparing to break through to the foundation establishment realm. As soon as Lin Yi said this, Li Jingming was stunned for a moment. Then he couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat, and he almost cried. The reason why he had personally come to look for Lin Yi today, apart from providing him with information, was mainly because of the matter regarding the foundation establishment pills. Li Jingming didn't really want to ask Lin Yi because he didn't feel like he had done much. But to him, breaking through to foundation building was the most important thing right now. Otherwise, if this continued, they would fall behind others, and in the future, they would not be able to compete. Previously, he had been rebuffed by Meng Jueguang. Now that he had turned to Lin Yi, the real boss, for help, Li Jingming had no choice but to do so. This could be determined from the fact that Xiao Hongkai and Xiao Ran both succeeded in breaking through to the foundation establishment realm. The foundation establishment pill that Lin Yi had received as a reward from the Back Mountain trial should have already been given to Xiao Hongkai, and as a newcomer, it was basically impossible for him to have a second foundation establishment pill on hand. But now, Li Jingming wasn't looking for Lin Yi to ask for a foundation establishment pill, but he wanted to ask Lin Yi to help him refine a foundation establishment pill. After all, he had just received 3 sets of ingredients for refining the foundation establishment pill from Meng Jueguang, and Lin Yi had long been an alchemist in the secular world. This was already an open secret. But even if Lin Yi was an alchemist, he might not have the ability to refine a foundation establishment pill. He might not necessarily have the ability to refine a foundation establishment pill. But now, Li Jingming had no other choice but to look for Lin Yi to try his luck. However, what Li Jingming didn't expect was that before he could even think of how to ask, Lin Yi had already taken the initiative to bring it up. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Lin Yi didn't make any additional requests. It was purely for the sake of helping him break through to the foundation establishment realm. On one side was Meng Jueguang's deceit. On the other side was Lin Yi's righteousness. With such a sharp contrast, if Li Jingming still didn't shed tears, then he would really be said to be heartless. Only when there was a contrast would there be a difference in superiority and inferiority. Compared to Lin Yi, Meng Jueguang, this time, in Li Jingming's heart, it was as if he had been trampled into a cave. There was no comparison at all. Boss Lin Yi, actually, the reason I came to find you today, other than to report the information, is to ask you to help me refine the foundation establishment pill. Li Jingming rubbed his nose and suppressed his emotions. Then he took out the 3 sets of ingredients that Meng Jueguang had given him and handed them to Lin Yi. Oh, you've even prepared the ingredients for the foundation establishment pill? That's not bad. It saves me the trouble of making a trip out. Seeing this, Lin Yi's eyes lit up. Although the ingredients for refining the foundation establishment pill were common goods that could be bought in the market square, Lin Yi didn't have enough on hand. After all, even if he had the intention to prepare his own spirit medicine storehouse, it had only been a short period of time and was far from enough. If Li Jingming didn't take them out, he would have to make a trip to the market square for a few of the spirit medicine storehouses. During the day, he had used his first impression to trick Yuzhe so that he wouldn't connect the 2 identities of Lin Yi and Lin Air together. However, even if he used his toes to think, he would know that Yuzhe and his master, Nan Tianyong, would definitely stay in the market square and continue to investigate. If they didn't dig out Lin Air, they absolutely wouldn't give up. Therefore, if Lin Yi went to the market square with the identity of Lin Air, it would be quite risky. If he wasn't careful, he could be blocked by Yuzhe and Nan Tianyong. Although Lin Yi didn't need to be afraid of Yuzhe, the other side still had Nan Tianyong, a guy who was able to sit in the position of supervising deacon of Soaring Sky Pavilion. His strength could be imagined. He was definitely not a small matter. Once he was blocked by these 2 people, With Lin Yi's current strength at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, he would definitely be in danger. However, if he didn't use the identity of Lin Yi and instead used Lin Yi's original appearance to go to the market square, it would be even easier for people to be suspicious. After all, the good jade that Lin Yi had in his possession had already been exchanged for useless jade. If he were to buy anything in the market square, once it was seen by someone with ulterior motives, it was very likely that it would cause Meng Jueguang and the others to become suspicious. That would be somewhat bad. Chapter 38:17. But now, for the sake of Li Zhengming, he decided to take some risks and make a trip. After all, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai had both succeeded in building their foundations, and Li Zhengming was his secret follower, so he couldn't disappoint him too much. However, what Lin Yi didn't expect was that Li Zhengming actually took the initiative to send the materials for the foundation establishment pill to him. This was a pleasant surprise. That's enough. Zhengming, go back and prepare first. I'll give you the foundation establishment pill tomorrow. Lin Yi comforted Li Zhengming. For him, who now had the godly pesticide cauldron, he could even successfully refine the foundation establishment pill and the foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill. So a mere foundation establishment pill was naturally not a problem. Boss Lin Yi, then, I'll leave first. Li Zhengming nodded gratefully, but he didn't say any more flattering words and immediately left. He knew that Boss Lin Yi was different from people like Meng Jueguang. Flattery and bragging had no effect on him. If he wanted to gain his true trust, he had to take concrete actions. And according to Lin Yi's usual style, as long as he sincerely worked for him, he would never treat himself badly. After watching Li Zhengming leave, Lin Yi immediately began to prepare for work. Although refining the foundation establishment pill was not challenging, it would still consume a lot of time. Therefore, before that, he had to at least take care of the 85 elixir seeds and ensure that they were infused with qi at a fixed time. According to the Sissy chief manager of the Spirit Medicine Nursery, it had been almost 20 days. Logically speaking, it should be about time. Even if the 85 spiritual herb seeds hadn't all grown, at least some of them should have developed first. However, what made Lin Yi speechless was that a total of 85 elixir seeds seemed to be collectively silent. Nearly 20 days had passed, and there was no movement at all. Lin even began to wonder if it was because the density of the spirit qi in the space of his jade pendant was too high that these elixir seeds were not used to it. Even humans have times when they can't handle the nourishment, let alone other ordinary crops. If too much fertilizer was applied, the seedlings would also burn. Although ordinary crops could not be mentioned in the same breath as spirit medicine seeds that gathered the essence of heaven and earth, and the spirit energy of heaven and earth was not ordinary fertilizer, logically speaking, there should not be a lack of nourishment. But in the current situation, this possibility could not be ruled out. Fortunately, although these 85 spirit herb seeds showed no signs of development, the color of their seed coats was quite good, and they didn't look like they were about to wither. Lin Yi felt that although these elixir seeds had not really begun to develop, they had been nourished in the space of the jade pendant for a period of time. His vitality was much better than when he first got his hands on him. He looked like he was malnourished. Although this was just Lin Yi's own speculation, there was some truth to it. Back then, that sissy manager had said that because these spirit herb seeds were cultivated in batches in the spirit medicine nursery, even if they could grow and survive, they would belong to the congenitally deficient batch. Not only could they not be left to cultivate, but even the quality of the cultivated spirit herb plants could not be compared to the spirit herbs that grew naturally in the wild. Everything had spirituality. Now that they were placed in the space of the jade pendant, which was a blessed environment, they could accumulate enough vitality to make up for the congenitally deficient vitality. This was completely possible. If that was the case, it would be a good thing for Lin Yi. After all, he only had 2 seeds of the heart-devourer exquisite grass, If the quality of the seeds turned out to be too low, he would be in trouble. If the quality of the final cultivated ones was too poor, it was very likely that they would not even be enough for 2 foundation-building pills. However, no matter how he guessed, as long as these spirit herb seeds did not die or die, Lin Yi could only continue to wait. He could not even seek advice from others. After all, this involved the space of the jade pendant, which was a very important secret. Unless it was someone he could completely trust, he definitely could not let others know. After imbuing the 85 spirit herb seeds with his qi as usual, Lin Yi made some preparations. He then used the spirit herb materials provided by Li Jingming and began to refine the foundation-building pills. The process didn't need much elaboration. He'd had the experience of making the foundation elixirs and the foundation-breaking elixirs before, and it was a walk in the park for him. Making a foundation elixir wasn't a problem at all. The night passed uneventfully. The next day, before the sky had even brightened, Li Zhengming's second cave dwelling at the foot of the mountain was lightly touched by someone. Li Zhengming was slightly surprised. He thought that it was Meng Jueguang and the others who wanted to find him for something. After all, although he had told Lin Yi about refining the foundation-building pills last night, and Lin Yi had agreed to it on the spot without saying anything, even a layman like Li Jingming knew that refining pills was definitely not a simple matter. Even if the grade of the foundation-building pill was not considered high, the process of refining it was still very exhausting. In order to guarantee the success rate, one must make thorough preparations. This preparation did not only refer to the refining materials, but more importantly, the alchemist himself had to spend time to adjust his state and recover his spirit. This time varied from person to person. Some were long, some were short, but according to Li Zhengming's knowledge, even the most powerful alchemist, from the moment they received the commission, would need at least a day to prepare. As for those who immediately started refining the foundation-building pills as soon as they received the materials, they were simply like cannons that could not guarantee the success rate. One must know that even if one meticulously prepared, the majority of alchemists only had a success rate of 20 to 30%. And if one did not make sufficient preparations, then one could not even hope for this 20 to 30% success rate. It was very likely that one would only have a success rate of 10% or even less. In this way, the 3 sets of foundation-building pills that Li Zhengming had taken from Meng Jueguang were not even enough to go to waste. However, according to his observations, his current boss Lin Yi had always been calm and steady. When it came to refining pills, no matter how careful he was, he should not be so reckless. Therefore, at the moment when the restriction of the Immortal's Cave was triggered, Li Jingming did not even think about Lin Yi and the foundation-building pills. Instead, he was thinking that since Meng Jueguang and the others came to find him so early in the morning, they might be up to something again. So he was prepared to secretly do some dirty tricks that could not be seen in the light. However, when he opened the door of the Immortal's Cave, Li Jingming could not help but be stunned again. There was no one in front of him. There was no sign of Meng Jueguang and the others as he expected. Chapter 38:18. Could it be? Li Jingming couldn't help but be shocked. This inconspicuous corner of the stone crack was one of the secret communication methods that he and Lin Yi had agreed on. Except for Lin Yi, no one else would put things in this corner that would normally not be noticed. Seeing that there was no one around, Li Zhengming quickly put the gray cloth bag into his sleeve, then turned around and returned to his cave residence. Closing the door of the cave residence and closing the restriction, Li Jingming took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in his heart. He reached out and slowly opened the cloth bag. Then his eyes suddenly widened. This is too fast. Looking at the 2 elixirs lying quietly in the cloth bag, even though Li Zhengming had been mentally prepared in advance, he still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. These 2 elixirs were naturally the foundation establishment pills that Lin Yi had refined for him. They had only talked about it last night, but the result was that it was delivered early this morning before dawn. This kind of speed, this kind of efficiency, even a guy like Li Zhengming, who was born in a native big family on the Heaven Stage Island, couldn't help but be stunned. In an instant, Li Jingming couldn't help but be in awe of his boss, Lin Yi. Lin Yi did what he said to him, this little brother on the one hand. Compared to him, a backer like Meng Jueguang was already thrown 10 streets away. Now, in Li Jingming's heart, there was no comparison. On the other hand, Li Jingming was amazed at Lin Yi's attainments in alchemy. From the time he finished talking to Lin Yi last night until now, it had only been a total of 4 hours. If it was any other alchemist, he was afraid that they wouldn't even have time to prepare. But his boss, Lin Yi, had already directly taken out the foundation establishment pills. And what made Li Jingming excited was that there were 2 of them. He had given a total of 3 sets of materials to Lin Yi. In the end, Lin Yi didn't need any preparation to directly start refining, and he even successfully refined 2 of them. The success rate was nearly 70%, which was simply incredible. On this point, Li Zhengming thought wrong. In fact, Lin Yi didn't just give him these 2 last night. He'd given him a total of 5 pills, but he didn't want it to be too shocking. He just didn't want to shock people too much, so he kept the other 3 for himself. Otherwise, he was afraid that it would shock Li Zhengming even more. Born in a local big family on Heaven Stage Island, Li Jingming's vision was far above other grassroots cultivators, and even with his vision, he was completely stunned by Lin Yi's alchemy attainments. Originally, Li Jingming thought that for a powerful newcomer like Lin Yi, alchemy should only be a side job, and his attainments could not be too deep. After all, the alchemist only had a level, but no strength. This kind of thing had long become common sense. And judging from Lin Yi's previous strong and overbearing performance, his strength was not even close to the word weak. Even among the experts of the same level, Lin Yi was definitely a first-class strong person. And such a person turned out to be an alchemist. This in itself had subverted everyone's understanding. But now Li Jingming found that his own boss Lin Yi's attainments in alchemy were even far above the average alchemist. Other than being shocked, he could not find any other words to describe his current mood. Holding the 2 foundation establishment pills for a long time, Li Jingming muttered with a sigh, "Boss Lin Yi is really a strange person." Not to mention that his own strength was unbelievably strong. The key was that he treated his subordinates very well. Even Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai, who were originally inconspicuous grassroots newcomers, were now ahead of the other newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion, and even the newcomers of Rushing Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion by a large margin. This was simply unimaginable in the past. Now he found out that this guy was actually an alchemist with profound attainments. Even Li Zhengming, who had a tough mind, had no temper towards his own boss Lin Yi. At this moment, he no longer had any temper towards his own boss Lin Yi. If it was before this, Li Jingming still thought that Lin Yi's luck was just a little better than his, and that in time he would still have the chance to surpass Lin Yi. But now he had no such thoughts at all. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Li Zhengming was now completely convinced by his boss. A monster like this wasn't something a normal person like him could compare to. Perhaps only a legendary person like Miracle Dr. Dan, Zhang Liju, could be compared to him. Although he had already given up on the thought of chasing Lin Yi, Li Jingming's desire to break through to foundation establishment didn't decrease, but instead it became even stronger. They were all followers under Lin Yi, and Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai were already 1 step ahead and had succeeded in foundation establishment. If this dragged on, he would only fall further and further behind. And this was a situation that Li Zhengming absolutely didn't want to see. Because the stronger Lin Yi was, the more unpredictable he was. This also meant that the followers under him would have a brighter future, and the more determined they would be. As a result, the competition between the followers would inevitably become more intense. Although Li Zhengming admired Lin Yi from the bottom of his heart, it didn't mean that he was convinced by people like Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai, and it didn't mean that he was willing to be inferior to them. These people were just lucky, receiving Boss Lin Yi's favor right from the start, and that was why they were one step ahead of him in foundation establishment. Now, Li Jingming also had 2 foundation establishment pills in his hands, and there was hope for him to break through in the near future. This also meant that the battle for the number 1 follower under Lin Yi had just begun. However, the foundation establishment pill didn't have an absolute effect on breaking through to foundation establishment. In fact, it was only used to change the meridians in the human body to make it more suitable for training, and it could only help to a certain extent in breaking through to foundation establishment. It didn't mean that any Sky-class full circle master would definitely succeed after taking the foundation establishment pill. Foundation establishment was the most important process for all cultivators. At this time, the stability of the foundation directly determined how far one could go in the future, so this process couldn't be replaced by pills. If one wanted to break through to the foundation establishment realm, at the very least, the most crucial condition was that one's own foundation was sufficient. Only by relying on one's own strength could one truly touch the barrier between the peak of the heaven stage and the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. External items like the foundation establishment pill could stimulate one's breakthrough. Chapter 3819. Mobile website. Please inform each other to recommend the promotional introduction to your QQ group, Weibo/WeChat forum, Tiaba. With Li Jingming's current strength, breaking through to the foundation building realm was not difficult at all. Basically, it could be said to be a piece of cake. Moreover, he had 2 foundation building pills in his hands. Even if he failed the first time, he would still have a second chance. Let's not talk about how smug Li Jingming was and how he was preparing to break through to the foundation establishment realm. On the other hand, after Lin Yi gave him 2 foundation establishment pills, his pace was as calm as ever. When he should cultivate, he would cultivate. When he should imbue the spiritual herb seeds with true energy, he would imbue them with true energy. He even went to the spirit jade hall to mine during the day. In any case, he had nothing to do. Apart from that, Lin Yi's most important task now was to guard the 85 elixir seeds in the space of the jade pendant, especially the 2 seeds of the heart-devouring exquisite grass. After all, it was directly related to when he could advance further. To Lin Yi, it could be said that he was surrounded by all kinds of strong enemies. Just relying on the strength of the early stage of foundation establishment was already a bit of a stretch. Only by advancing to the middle stage of foundation establishment as soon as possible would he have more confidence and be able to advance and retreat more freely. Another 3 days passed, and there was still no movement from the elixir seed in the space of the jade pendant. Even the usually calm Lin, it couldn't help but feel a little uneasy at this time. Counting the days, it had been a full 22 days since these elixir seeds were transplanted into the space of the jade pendant. They should have borne fruit by now. In fact, this was indeed the case. Apart from Lin Yi, the first batch of spiritual herb seeds planted by the other rookies, whether they survived or died, were basically settled. Therefore, before the 6th round of the rookie challenge began, almost all the rookies around the arena were talking about the elixir seeds. Judging from the results of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's first attempt, it was not very optimistic. If someone was observant, they would realize that among all the rookies in Blue Cloud Pavilion, other than Lin Yi, Xiao Ran, Qiao Hongkai, and Li Zhengming, the other 11 had experimented with a total of 23 spiritual herb seeds. In the end, they had successfully grown and were sent to the Spirit Medicine Nursery for scoring. There were only 2 of them. The 2 lucky fellows had each drawn a spirit herb seed that had an extremely strong vitality and a relatively low requirement for the outside world. Therefore, they had managed to gain something. However, the first batch of spirit herb seeds for the remaining 9 people, including Meng Tong, had been completely annihilated. Although this result was disastrous, it was still within reason. After all, It was very difficult for a newcomer's cave in Blue Cloud Pavilion to satisfy the spiritual energy requirements of the spiritual herb seeds. Moreover, because of the rookie challenge competition, many people couldn't even guarantee the supply of true qi at a fixed time. Rookies like Meng Tong and Cha Wu, who were frequently heavily injured in the challenge matches, could be found everywhere. This also made the Clear Cloud Pavilion disciples realize one thing: the elixir refinement round was nothing but a scam to them. The only use of the spirit herb seeds was to deduct points when the time came. Basically, no matter how many spirit herb seeds were collected, the points would be deducted. Even if a few spirit herb seeds were successfully cultivated, it would only be a few points deducted. If one wanted to rely on this segment to earn points, it would be if they wanted to rely on this segment to earn points, they would simply be blinded. But fortunately, most of the Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies already knew this, so they basically only reported the minimum of 10 spirit herb seeds. This segment would at most deduct 10 points, apart from people like Cha Wu, who had the lowest points and was a weakling with no eyes. As long as the other rookies had some results in the challenge round, they would not have negative points deducted. Moreover, because everyone would have their points deducted together, there was almost no obvious impact on their ranking. However, someone suddenly recalled something. Back then, when the Spiritual Medicine Garden was registering for the spiritual medicine seeds, a certain maverick newcomer had registered an unprecedented 40 spiritual medicine seeds. The more one reported, the more points would be deducted. Now, this speculation had been verified to be an ironclad rule. Therefore, when the other rookies only needed to have 10 points deducted, this idiot who reported 40 spirit herb seeds had to have a total of 40 points deducted. Of course, there were also people who were betting that Lin Yi would be lucky enough to get 1 or 2 seeds out of the 40 seeds, but that would only reduce his points by a few points, that was all. Even if Lin Yi was strong enough to take first place, some things couldn't be solved with strength alone. Even the strongest person had to pay for their stupidity. Yo, the number 1 rookie of the Blue Cloud Pavilion who reported 40 spirit herb seeds. How's the spirit herb seed going? I don't think I've seen your report to the spirit herb garden these past 2 days. While the crowd was discussing, 2 uninvited guests suddenly appeared. It was Kong Mingming and Zhong Pingliang. Although the 6th round of the newcomer challenge was about to begin, there was still a little time before then. They couldn't do anything big, but it was more than enough to find an old rival and have a few sarcastic remarks. As soon as Kong Mingming and Zhong Pingliang appeared, they naturally became the focus of the crowd, especially Kong Ming. Due to young master Su Lingchong's special care, he was now in the limelight, no less than Lin Yi. He fully deserved to be the number 1 rookie of the Soaring Pavilion. Kong Xiaoming and Lin Yi were 2 people who had a deep grudge against each other in the common world. Now that they were in the North Island's welcoming pavilion, one of them became the number 1 newcomer of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, and the other became the number 1 newcomer of the Clear Cloud Pavilion. Watching these 2 fight in front of everyone, it was definitely a wonderful sight to behold. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on Lin Yi, and they didn't even try to hide their schadenfreude, especially Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong. Since they weren't ready to take the meridian heart-shattering pill, they had no choice but to endure Lin Yi's strong aura for the time being. Now that they could see Lin Yi being ridiculed by Kong Mingming, there was only one word that could describe it. It felt so good. Facing the ridiculing Kong Mingming, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows slightly. Instead of answering, he asked, "Don't tell me that the legendary new deacon has to be in charge of guarding the spirit herb nursery? That's really a tough job. It seems like I should find a chance to reward you with some spirit jade." Kong Mingming couldn't help but choke when he heard that. Zhong Pingliang, who was beside him, couldn't help but laugh secretly. Kong Mingming had tried so hard to come here to see Boss Lin Yi make a fool of himself, but he ended up choking on a single sentence. It was like the legendary rushing to be humiliated. It was a delightful scene. Chapter 38:20. The matter of Lin Yi being exchanged for good jade was now known by many people in Yingxin Pavilion. In the eyes of everyone, probably only a few of Lin Yi's own subordinates did not know about it. If they knew, driven by benefits, they might join in to cheat Lin Yi, this stupid boss. After all, as the old saying goes, don't let the goodies flow into the fields of outsiders. Kong Mingming's words made everyone smile, but no one interrupted in detail. They were afraid that if they said too much, Lin Yi would realize it. After all, no matter how stupid Lin Yi was, this kind of thing could still be easily exposed if it was said face to face. Lin Yi and the others looked at each other and smiled. The rumor that Lin Yi was cheated with waste jade was naturally heard by senior brother Ku Bai and Xiao Ran, and Lin Yi had already explained it to them using the same excuse that he had told senior brother Ku Bai in the past. Kong Mingming and the others were all gloating. They thought that boss Lin Yi was really a fool who couldn't distinguish good jade and waste jade. They didn't know that they who believed in such absurd words were the real fools who still helped others to earn money after being cheated. Seeing that Lin Yi didn't bother to talk at all, Kong Mingming turned and said, I came here this time because I want to communicate with you as an alchemist. In the first batch of experiments, I experimented with 6 elixir seeds. As a result, 3 of them were cultivated. There was only a 50% survival rate. I am not very satisfied with my results. What do you think, big newcomer Lin? As soon as these words came out, the surrounding Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. 3 out of 6 seeds survived, a 50% survival rate. This result was simply beyond the efforts of all the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers. Apart from Lin Yi's group, the other 11 Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies had only managed to nurture 2 spiritual herb seeds. They were incomparable to Kong Mingming. According to the sissy manager of the Spirit Medicine Nursery, newbies like them would be lucky if 3 out of 10 spirit herb seeds could survive. Kong Mingming's 50% survival rate was already the limit. How ridiculous! If they weren't satisfied with this kind of result, then what was the point of living for the rest of them? They might as well go buy a piece of tofu and kill themselves. After exclaiming for a while, everyone's gaze once again landed on Lin Yi. He smiled faintly and said in a serious tone, Only a 50% chance of survival, that's a little pathetic. Zhao Ming, you have to work hard. Don't embarrass us alchemists. That look on Lin Yi's face was that of a senior to a junior, and it almost made everyone laugh. Taking advantage of the situation, Lin Yi was just too much of a scumbag. Gah. Kong Mingming's face darkened. His 50% survival rate had already blinded everyone in the Spirit Medicine Nursery. How dare you, an idiot who hadn't managed to nurture a single spiritual herb after such a long time, talk to me like this? Zhong Pingliang couldn't help but laugh secretly again. Kong Mingming wanted to show off in front of boss Lin Yi. But not only did he fail, he even got stepped on by boss Lin Yi. He was probably about to explode from anger. Is that so? Then I'd like to ask, how many have you managed to nurture after so many days? Big newbie Lin, you won't bring shame to us alchemists, will you? Kong Mingming's face darkened as he forced a cold smile. Hey, didn't you just say that the Spirit Medicine Nursery is a part of the new manager's job? Can't you just keep your eyes open and watch? Still, your math was taught by a PE teacher. Don't you have confidence in yourself? Lin Yi looked at Kong Mingming strangely, as if he was worried about his stupidity. With so many people looking at him like he was an idiot, Kong Mingming wanted to slap all of them until they became idiots. Unfortunately, that wasn't realistic. Even if he could fight, he wouldn't be able to defeat Lin Yi. Humph, you have a sharp tongue. I'll wait to see you cry. Kong Mingming humphed coldly. Seeing that the challenge was about to begin, he gave Zhong Pingliang a look and turned to leave. Zhong Pingliang laughed coldly in his heart. You idiot! Haven't you had enough of being stepped on? Boss Lin Yi stepped on you all the way from the common world to Sky Island. The more you suffer, the braver you become. This mental fortitude wasn't something an ordinary person could have. It's a good thing I've joined Boss Lin long ago. Otherwise, who knows when I'll be stepped on again. Looking at Kong Mingming and Zhong Pingyang's backs as they left, Senior Brother Bitter, Xiao Ran, and the others looked at each other. Although they had successfully defeated the arrogant guy with their words, they couldn't help but look at Lin Yi with worry in their eyes. Junior Brother Lin, are you sure you can handle those elixir seeds alone? Senior Brother Bitter couldn't help but ask after a moment of silence. Not only did Lin Yi take 40 seeds for himself, but he also took Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongcai's. Even Senior Brother Bitter didn't know that Lin Yi still had Li Zhengming and Zhong Pingliang's elixir seeds. But he knew one thing. If something happened to Lin Yi, then they'd all be wiped out in the trial. Although, with the condition of the Clear Cloud Pavilion's newbies, it wouldn't be a surprise if they were all wiped out. But what the bitter senior brother was worried about was that, after being provoked by Kong Xiaoming, Lin Yi might go all out and waste his pure energy on these seeds. Once he used up too much of his true qi, not only would his strength be affected, there was a high chance that he would reveal his flaws during the challenge. This was something that even the strongest of masters couldn't avoid, and Lin Yi, the #1 newcomer of Clear Cloud Pavilion, was no exception. Even Senior Brother Bitter, who had always been honest and kind, couldn't help but wonder if this was a trap that Meng Jueguang and the others had set for Lin Yi. According to their previous guesses, after young master Su Lingchong's appearance in the last round, Meng Jueguang would definitely make a big move. And this big move might not be aimed at the two underlings, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongcai. Instead, it was very likely that he would make a move on Lin Yi. After all, with young Master Su's involvement, it would be child's play to deal with Xiao, Ran, and Xiao Hongcai. If you want to catch a thief, you must first catch the king. Senior Brother Bitter wasn't the only one who had this concern. Even Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongcai could easily think of this. After all, Kong Mingming and Meng Jueguang were all young Master Su's underlings, and they were all in the same group. It was normal for them to have this kind of tacit understanding. Chapter 38:21. Senior Brother Ku was stunned, but Xiao Ran nodded in agreement. That's right, we don't need these points at all. Even if they were completely wiped out, the two of them would at most lose 10 points each. But for them who were experts in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, so what? Meng Tong, who was also an expert in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, was completely suppressed by the two of them. Other than Lin Yi, the boss, the other newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion did not have the strength to compete with the two of them. For them, the following newcomer challenge competition had become a feast for points. In the following newcomer challenge competition, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongcai could easily grab over 100 points. In comparison, the 10 points deducted from the trial of spiritual medicine was not worth mentioning. It was not only the two of them. For Lin Yi, who had registered for 40 spiritual medicine seeds, the consequences of being completely wiped out were far less severe than imagined. This was because he had built a foundation by getting full marks in the previous 2 rounds. Even if he lost 40 points, the other newcomers had no chance of catching up to him. In the entire Blue Cloud Pavilion, the only newcomer who could pose a threat to Lin Yi was Meng Tong, who was ranked 2nd. If Meng Tong could crush his opponents in the newcomer challenge competition, and Lin Yi lost 40 points, then there would still be a chance to kick Lin Yi off his pedestal. Unfortunately, Meng Tong was still recovering from his injuries. Not to mention dealing with Lin Yi, he could not even overcome the 2 mountains of Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongcai, who were Lin Yi's subordinates. If this situation continued, Meng Tong would never be able to catch up to Lin Yi in this lifetime. In this way, for Lin Yi's team, whether they were completely wiped out in the trial of spiritual medicine or not, and whether they would lose a lot of points, it didn't matter anymore. After figuring this out, the bitter senior brother could not help but smile. When one's strength was strong enough to surpass everyone else, then no matter how many twists and turns there were in the process, the bitter senior brother could not help but smile. How big of a mistake would there be? The outcome had already been decided. However, at this time Lin Yi said indifferently, "But I don't care if you lack these points. However, who said that all my elixir seeds would be wiped out?" Huh. Senior brother Bitter and the others were immediately stunned. The results of the first batch of experiments by the other newcomers were already out. If there were any spirit herb seedlings that could be nurtured to live, they wouldn't be able to survive. He must have been sent to the spirit medicine nursery to be graded. Seedlings of spirit herbs had much higher environmental requirements than seeds of spirit herbs. With the conditions of the newcomers in the welcoming pavilion, even the best newcomers in the Soaring Sky Pavilion were far from being able to meet the basic requirements of a seedling of spirit herbs. If they didn't hand over the seedlings of spirit herbs after they were nurtured, then they would definitely die in their hands. All his previous efforts had gone to waste. Therefore, as long as someone successfully nurtured a seed of spirit herbs, they would immediately send it to the spirit medicine nursery. Otherwise, no matter how many seedlings of spirit herbs were nurtured, it would be useless. According to what Senior Brother Bitter and the others knew, these days, Lin Yi had never been to the spirit medicine nursery. This also meant that no matter how many seeds Lin Yi had nurtured in the first batch of experiments, at least one thing was certain. He had not nurtured a single one of them. This result was a heavy blow to Lin Yi, who had always been invincible. In addition, when Kong Ming Ming came over to ridicule him, Senior Brother Bitter and the others were afraid that Lin Yi would be depressed, so they deliberately brought up this topic to enlighten him. Unexpectedly, this guy didn't seem to be affected at all. "Don't worry. Since this matter has been handed over to me, there's nothing to worry about. When the time comes, just wait and see the results." Lin Yi smiled at them and said. Senior Brother Bitter and the others looked at each other. Although they still couldn't understand where Lin Yi's confidence came from, they still nodded in unison. After all, ever since they met Lin Yi, this guy had never failed to do what he said he would do. So this time it should be no exception. In the 6th round of the Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge, other than the disturbance at the beginning, everything else was going according to everyone's expectations. Xiao Hongkai and Xiao Ran, the two mountains under Lin Yi, challenged one after another to obtain points. As for Meng Tong, he was the only one among the remaining newcomers who could pose a threat to them. Although many people, including Lin Yi, thought that young Master Su would make a big move after seeing his appearance in the last round, at least in this round, it seemed that Meng Tong was still holding back. In fact, he had no choice but to hold back. He had not recovered from his injuries from the last time he fought with Xiao Hongkai. Even if he recovered, with his strength in the early stage of foundation establishment, he might not be a match for Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai. Therefore, the only thing Meng Tong could do now was to pick up the soft persimmons after Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai challenged them. Although this method made him the self-proclaimed boss of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, feel extremely aggrieved. Given the current situation, there was no other way. Otherwise, with his current condition, he would only be looking for trouble if he faced either Xiao Ran or Xiao Hongkai. Apart from these three, the remaining two Blue Cloud Pavilion top 5 newcomers, Lin Yi, the number 1 newcomer, was idling around as usual. As for Li Jingming, he also did not have a chance to go on stage. However, even if he did not go on stage to show his strength with Lin Yi's golden finger, he could tell that this guy's temperament was completely different from before. Without a doubt, thanks to the 2 foundation establishment pills, Li Jingming had finally broken through to foundation establishment, becoming the 5th expert in the early stage of foundation establishment among the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion. However, it was unknown whether it was because the other people present did not notice at all, or because Li Jingming hid it too well, but these people, including Meng Jueguang, did not notice the change in Li Jingming's body at all. From what they knew, Li Jingming was still at heaven's stage great perfection. He was not an expert in the early stage of foundation establishment who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Meng Tong or fight with Lin Yi. This was the situation that Li Jingming, who deliberately kept a low profile, liked to see the most. Otherwise, Meng Jueguang might ask him to deal with Lin Yi, and that would be a little troublesome. The 6th round of the newcomers' challenge passed just like that. However, when Lin Yi returned to his cave abode and habitually entered the jade pendant space, he inadvertently glanced around and was shocked by the scene in front of him. Chapter 38:22. For 22 days, the 85 elixir seeds had been silent. Now, after only one round of the challenge, they had all awakened. That's right, they had awakened. Although the seeds of these elixirs had not truly developed into seedlings, and strictly speaking, their current state was not much different from before. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that they were different from the motionless state they were in before. They had awakened. The seed coat had begun to crack, and the young sprouts and roots were already bursting out. It was a scene full of vitality and prosperity. Lin Yi's heart, which was still in a state of anxiety, finally fell to the ground after seeing this. Including the 2 seeds of the heart-devouring exquisite grass, the 85 elixir seeds had all awakened. The space in the jade pendant didn't disappoint Lin Yi and gave him a big surprise. Before today's challenge, they were still in a state of collective silence. However, after a short afternoon, the 85 elixir seeds had all awakened. Even though Lin Yi had seen many strange things, he still couldn't help but feel a little strange at this moment. At first, there was no movement. However, as soon as Kong Mingming taunted, the 85 elixir seeds all awakened. This was simply a slap in the face. If Kong Mingming knew about this, he would definitely faint from anger. But for the troubled Lin Yi, this Kong Xiaoming was truly his lucky star. He didn't know how long he'd have to wait for Kong Xiaoming to appear otherwise. Everything has spirituality. This saying is really true. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. If everything went as expected, in the next few days, the 85 elixir seeds that had awakened would really start to germinate. Under the nourishment of the pure spiritual qi in the space in the jade pendant, it was only a matter of time before they grew into seedlings. However, Lin Yi suddenly realized that it seemed that it was necessary to go to the marketplace. Now, including the 2 seeds of the heart-devouring exquisite grass, the 85 elixir seeds had all awakened. With the unique conditions of the space in the jade pendant, it was almost a matter of success to successfully cultivate them into seedlings. And because the growth cycle of these elixir seeds had been artificially accelerated by countless times, that day would not be far away. Then, as expected, Lin Yi would soon be able to harvest 2 stalks of heart-devouring exquisite grass, and he could start preparing to refine the most important foundation-building pill. However, if he wanted to refine the foundation-building pill, just relying on 2 stalks of heart-devouring exquisite grass was clearly not enough. Furthermore, with his current spirit medicine reserves, there was no way for him to gather the other ingredients. In order not to delay refining the foundation-building pill, it was necessary to go to the market square in the near future. Although he knew that if he appeared in the market as Lin Er, it was very likely that he would run into his enemy, Yu Zhe, and even his master, Nan Tianyong. This threat was definitely not to be underestimated. However, compared to the foundation-building pill, for Lin Yi, this risk was nothing. After all, he couldn't just avoid risks. It was not Lin Yi's style to not even care about the ingredients needed to refine the foundation-building pill. After making up his mind, the next morning, Lin Yi put on the 1,000 threads mask and appeared in the marketplace as Lin Er. Although they were the materials for the foundation-building pill last time, he had bought it in the street for a total of 8 pieces of spirit jades, and he had successfully refined the foundation establishment pill. But this time, Lin Yi did not intend to repeat it. Firstly, There are a lot of people on the street, and it was difficult to buy all the ingredients in the same store. This meant that they would need to spend a lot of time looking for the ingredients, which would be easily noticed by people with ulterior motives. This would greatly increase the chances of encountering Yuja. Secondly, the quality of the herbs that could be bought in the outer streets were generally not high. Last time, because he only had a few spirit jades on hand, he did not have a choice. Thus, Lin Yi could only make do with what he had. Fortunately, the heart-devouring, exquisite grass that he had painstakingly picked in the back mountain was of excellent quality. Thus, it did not affect the quality of the foundation-building pill. However, this time, even with the help of the space in the jade pendant, the quality of the 2 stalks of heart-devouring, exquisite grass could not be compared to the stalk from last time due to the innate deficiency of the spiritual medicine seeds. In this way, if Lin Yi still wanted to guarantee the success rate of refining the foundation establishment pill, he would have to work on other spiritual medicine materials. Due to these 2 reasons, compared to the noisy outer street and middle street, the inner street of the market was obviously more suitable for Lin Yi's requirements. However, not everyone could easily enter the inner street. Whether it was strength or status, Lin Yi was still far from reaching the threshold of the inner street. Moreover, today was not the opening day of the inner street that was once a month. However, Lin Yi finally managed to sneak into the inner street as he wished. This was thanks to the shopkeeper Hong Zhonghong of the Hong Merchant Guild, because he had given Lin Yi a spirit jade card of the Heaven Stage Island Commerce Alliance. With this card opening the way, the guards of the inner street only looked at Lin Yi with slight surprise and let him pass. Just as Hong Zhonghong said, this kind of spirit jade card was not something that anyone could obtain. Looking at the entire Heaven Stage Island, only a small group of people whose status was recognized by the Commerce Alliance could have this kind of treatment. This was far more useful than the identity of the inner disciples of the 3 pavilions. It was not an exaggeration to say that the inner street was a place that most of the inner disciples of the 3 pavilions did not have the right to enter, as long as the spirit jade card was shown. Even if it was a dog, the guards would not hesitate to let it in, because even if it was a dog with a spirit jade card. No one had a reason to stop it, let alone the right to do so. Because it was not the opening day of the inner street, the scene that Lin Yi saw when he entered the inner street this time was far more deserted than the previous 2 times. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was completely deserted. But even so, these merchants did not care at all. To be able to enter the inner street, even the most inconspicuous merchant, meant that there was a huge force behind it. Their appearance here was not necessarily to compete with a giant like the Hong Merchant Guild. More importantly, their purpose was to declare their existence. Even if they could not earn much spirit jade, they at least had to create a signboard in this exclusive area of the upper class, so that people would not ignore them. After entering the inner street, Lin Yi went straight to the Hong Merchant Guild. Hong Zhonghong had left a good impression on him last time. Although he did not plan to buy any valuable treasures this time, intuition told Lin Yi that it was not a bad thing to have more contact with this kind of old and wise merchant. Chapter 38-23. Even though there were many guests, as soon as Lin Yi walked into the Hong Chamber of Commerce, he was recognized by the manservant at the door. "Young hero Lin, please come upstairs." "You know me?" Lin Yi was surprised. If this person was Hong Zhong, it would be easier to understand. After all, he gave him a spirit jade card, so it was normal to have some impression of him. However, it was a bit exaggerated that this manservant, whom he did not know, knew him. Of course, we have to memorize the names and appearances of the important guests every morning and evening to avoid neglecting any important guests. This is the rule of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. The manservant smiled and led Lin Yi to a private room on the 2nd floor. Lin Yi could not help but praise him in his heart. The Hong Chamber of Commerce was indeed a top chamber of commerce on Heaven Level Island. Stepping into the private room, Manager Hong Zhong immediately stood up to welcome him. Young hero Lin, it's been a long time. Lin Yi bowed slightly and returned the greeting. Shopkeeper Hong, I hope you have been well since we last met. Sorry to bother you again. Hee, young hero Lin, you are too kind. It is our Hong Merchant Group's honor to have you patronize us. We could not ask for more. What do you need this time? Hong Zhong laughed. He was secretly surprised that Lin Er had not been crippled by Yu Zhe and the others. He was indeed capable. I need to prepare some elixirs. The higher the quality, the better. 5 sets. Lin Yi took out a list and handed it to Hong Zhong. There were dozens of elixirs listed on it. To be safe, in order to prevent the recipe of the foundation building pill from being recognized by others, the elixirs needed for the foundation building pill were only a small part of the list. As for the rest of the elixirs listed on the list, apart from being used as a cover, they were also used to fill up the elixir storage. After all, as an alchemist, he did not need to have all the elixir storage. But at least when he wanted to refine some common basic elixirs, he would not have to personally run errands every time. He even had to think of a way to collect all the elixir's ingredients, one by one. That would be too unprofessional. Hong Zhong took Lin Yi's list and glanced at it briefly before asking in surprise, Forgive this old man for asking, but is young hero Lin an alchemist? Other than alchemists who would gather so many elixirs and materials at once, there was no other way. Even if other people wanted to find someone to refine pills for them, they would at most buy the corresponding spiritual herbs and materials. They would not spend spiritual jades on so many things that they might not even use in their lifetime. That's right, I am indeed an alchemist. However, I only know a little about it. Please excuse me, Manager Hong. Lin Yi nodded lightly. Since it was very likely that he would have to deal with Shopkeeper Hong for a long time in the future, Lin Yi did not intend to hide anything about this matter. After all, if he needed spiritual jades, selling some pills to Shopkeeper Hong was not a bad choice. Furthermore, there was no need to deliberately conceal the identity of an alchemist. If he chose to conceal it at this time, it would not be good if he leaked it or was discovered in the future. Seeing that Lin Yi admitted it, Hong Zhong couldn't help but be shocked. However, on the surface, he smiled from ear to ear. Since ancient times, heroes come from the young. This saying is indeed true. Young hero Lin has a bright future. Hong Zhong's words were a little exaggerated. Although alchemists had a high status, they were generally weak. In the world of practitioners where the strong ruled, they didn't have a bright future. After all, miracle Dr. Dan St. John Liju was a freak who could step into the top tier of alchemists. There wouldn't even be one in a few hundred years. However, if the 2 foundation-breaking pills from last time were made by Lin Er himself, then it would be more than enough to be worthy of this title. After being in Hong Merchant Association for so many years, Hong Zhong had his own way of dealing with people. Although he really wanted to know if the 2 foundation-breaking pills from last time were made by Lin Er. However, before their relationship deepened and stabilized, he would not be stupid enough to ask such a question. This time it was enough for him to know that Lin Er was an alchemist. Young hero Lin, please wait for a moment in the private room. I will get someone to prepare it. Hong Zhong passed the list to the servant who was waiting at the door. As it involved more than 10 types of ingredients, although Hong Merchant Association had all of them, it would still take a lot of time. Lin Yi nodded. Since he had nothing to do, he decided to take the time to walk around Hong Merchant Association. There were so many valuable ingredients. Even if he didn't plan to buy them, it wouldn't be a bad thing to take the opportunity to learn more about them. However, what Lin Yi didn't expect at all was that when he was walking around Hong Merchant Association, he bumped into someone out of nowhere. It was Yu Zhe. As the saying goes, enemies don't meet unless they're enemies. At the corner of the display cabinets on the 2nd floor, the 2 of them met face to face without any mental preparation. In that instant, both of them froze. In Lin Yi's expectation, Because today wasn't the opening day of the inner street. A normal inner disciple like you just shouldn't be able to enter the inner street, much less appear in this Hong Merchant Association. Otherwise, if Yuja had the ability to enter and exit the inner street freely, he wouldn't have to wait until the inner street was open to the public like he did with himself. As a result, Lin Yi had been extra careful when he'd entered the market, especially when he'd passed through the outer and middle streets. He'd tried his best to avoid being noticed by anyone, in case there were Yuja's eyes. But now that he'd entered the inner street, he'd let his guard down. After all, in theory, Yuja didn't have the right to enter the inner street. The possibility of him appearing in the inner street was almost zero. However, Lin Yi forgot that Yuja wasn't alone. He had a master, Nan Tianyong, the supervising deacon of Rising Sky Pavilion. With Nan Tianyong's status, it was naturally easy for him to enter and exit the inner street. However, even so, he couldn't bring Yuja with him. The problem was that he had the same Spirit Jade card as Lin Yi. Of course, this Spirit Jade card did not come from the Hong Chamber of Commerce, but from another top chamber of commerce in the Merchant Union. In fact, with Nan Tianyong's own strength and status, there was still a long way to go before he could obtain this Spirit Jade card. However, he had two more powerful brothers, and this Spirit Jade card was borrowed from one of them. In order to investigate Lin Air, Nan Tianyong specially borrowed this Spirit Jade card. Chapter 38-24. He couldn't forget about the star inkstone. Apart from scheming to get it back from Lin Air, Yuja would use his master Nan Tianyong's privilege to come to the inner streets every few days because he often wandered around the market. All the large merchants, including the Hong Merchant Group, were his targets. If one piece of star inkstone appeared in the Hong Merchant Group, then perhaps there would be a second piece. This was something that no one could say for sure. And even if there wasn't a star inkstone, perhaps he could come across other treasures. He, Yuja, had stayed in the library for 3 years, and his ability to recognize certain treasures was even better than some treasure appraisers in the merchant group. Perhaps he would have a chance to pick up some leftovers. As for him appearing in the Hong Merchant Group at this moment, it wasn't strange at all. Although the Hong Merchant Group had said that his master, Nan Tianyong, was not welcome after the previous incident, they had never said that even he, Yuja, could not enter. And because of the same deduction as Lin Yi, although Yuja had been paying attention to the outer and middle streets of the market, even urging his master Nan Tianyong to spend a lot of spirit jade to find some merchants to monitor Lin Air's movements, he had never thought that he would actually meet Lin Air at the Hong Merchant Group when the inner streets weren't open to the public. The star ink stone was stolen, and he ambushed Lin Air halfway, but he was beaten half to death instead. Yuja's resentment towards this Lin Air could be said to be bone deep. He wanted nothing more than to skin him and drink his blood. Otherwise, he wouldn't have schemed so much, and even dug 3 feet into the ground to find Lin Air. But now that they really met face to face without any warning, Yuja was like Lin Yi, instantly stunned. After a moment, the two of them reacted at the same time, and their first reaction was to kill each other. After all, whether it was Lin Yi or Yuja, they both knew that they would not rest until one of them died. Both of them knew that they would not rest until one of them was dead, and there was no possibility of them shaking hands and making peace. This kind of enmity was far more fatal than the enmity between Lin Yi and the people in the welcoming pavilion. Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang also saw Lin Yi as a thorn in their side, but it wasn't to the point where they would not rest until one of them died. But it wasn't to the point where they would fight to the death. At the very least, they wouldn't take the risk to kill Lin Yi. Even Yuja's master, Nan Tianyong, did not have such a strong killing intent towards Lin Air. Only Yuja was determined to kill Lin Air. There was only one reason. Starring Stone. Cultivators were the most realistic group of people. In the face of benefits, There were no eternal friends, and there were no eternal enemies, unless it was someone who was deeply subdued, like Xiao Ran, Qiao Hongkai, Li Zhengming, and Zhong Pingliang. Even if he had been beaten half to death by Lin's second, to tell the truth, Yu Zhi wouldn't have gone to such lengths to dig out Lin's second. There was only one reason for him to do this: the Star Inkstone. The Star Inkstone. In the face of such a precious treasure that could change the fate of a cultivator, Yu Zhi wouldn't even recognize his own father. How could Yu Zhi possibly ignore Lin Er, an enemy who had beaten him half to death? That would really be strange. In the blink of an eye, the duo's aura was raised to the extreme, and their strongest killing moves were about to be unleashed. After all, they had already fought to the death before. They were both well aware of each other's strength. Whether it was Lin Yi who had the upper hand or Yu Zhi who had the advantage in terms of level, they didn't dare underestimate the opponent in front of them. Otherwise, if they weren't careful, they might lose their lives. Although they hadn't clashed yet, the killing moves of both sides had already been revealed. One was the fatal chain sword, 24 forms, and the other was the fiery 8 trigrams palm, 22 forms. The powerful aura that the two instantly unleashed caused the surrounding display racks to tremble. It was as if a storm was about to come. The surrounding customers couldn't help but be shocked. Although Yu Zhi and Lin Yi were at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, one was at the mid-stage of foundation establishment. In a place like the inner street, this kind of strength couldn't even be considered powerful, but they had no intentions of interfering. Those who could enter the inner street were either rich or noble. Who knew if these two were the grandsons of some big shot? If they rashly interfered, they might get into trouble, so they might as well watch the show from the sidelines. However, in the next moment, the shaking display racks suddenly calmed down, and the strongest killing moves that Yu Zhi and Lin Yi had prepared to unleash also disappeared at the same time. It gave people the feeling that none of this had happened. This wasn't because the two of them stopped voluntarily, but because they had no choice but to stop. This was because an unfathomable aura that was far more powerful than them had enveloped them in an instant. Faced with such an insurmountable difference in level, whether it was Lin Yi or Yu Zhi, they couldn't ignore this warning. If they didn't care and continued to attack, they might have become two corpses before they could even unleash their killing moves. Never to step out of the Hong Merchant Guild again. Settle your personal grudges outside. The Hong Merchant Guild forbids fighting. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Please conduct yourselves with dignity. The cold voice of a guest expert traveled into everyone's ears. Although they couldn't see him in person, just this unfathomable aura was enough to intimidate one side. Lin Yi couldn't help but be secretly shocked. He had been on the Heavenly Island for more than 2 months, and he had seen many experts. However, judging from the aura alone, this guest expert of the Hong Merchant Guild could definitely be ranked in the top 10. Counting carefully, the other experts who could be ranked above were probably only the few elders from the 3 pavilions who had appeared before, and Ramjia, the hall master of the law enforcement hall, who was only seen once in 100 years. Other than them, the guest expert of the Hong Merchant Guild was the strongest. Any random guest expert had such terrifying strength. As the top chamber of commerce on the Heavenly Five Islands, the Hong Merchant Guild's background was really unfathomable. Lin Yi was just shocked, but at this moment, Yu Zhi was really frightened. His master, Nan Tianyong, had suffered a great loss a while ago. Ever since he was thrown out of the window on the 2nd floor, even with Nan Tianyong's arrogant and overbearing character and his powerful background that was not inferior to the 2nd-generation young masters of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, he still didn't dare to take a step into the Hong Merchant Guild. Even when he brought Yu Zhao into the inner street recently, he was a little scared and tried to hide as far away as possible for fear of provoking the dissatisfaction of the few guest experts of the Hong Merchant Guild. Chapter 38:25. That murderous intent seemed to be saying, "If you dare to say anything, this old man will kill you." Absolutely. Although the strength of a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator wasn't considered strong here, this kind of intuition of life and death was something that every cultivator was born with. Moreover, it had been proven that if this kind of intuition was ignored, it could really kill someone. One word of deterrence forced the two of them to stop fighting at the same time. Then the guest's aura disappeared in an instant, as if it had never appeared. Seeing this, the surrounding people no longer paid attention to Lin, Yi, and Yuja. After all, with the appearance of a guest expert, this fight definitely wouldn't happen, unless these two people had holes in their brains and wanted to die in the hands of the guest. Consider yourself lucky to be able to live a little longer. But unfortunately, your luck ends here. Yuja looked deeply at Lin Yi, his eyes full of hatred. Then he turned around and walked out of the Hong Merchant Association, leaving behind a sentence. "See you outside, Second Lin." This guy, from what he said, was he going to block the door? Lin Yi's eyes narrowed. Although he was already prepared to meet Yuja before coming to the market, this situation was the worst-case scenario. It really didn't make him happy. "Young hero Lin, looks like you're in trouble this time." Hong Zhong's voice suddenly sounded from behind Lin Yi. Lin Yi turned around and saw the old man pointing outside the window. This was the second floor of the Hong Merchant Association. Looking down from the window, the entire inner street was in plain view. Lin Yi walked to the window and looked down. His gaze naturally focused on Yuja, who had just walked out of the Hong Merchant Association. He saw Yuja walking quickly towards a middle-aged man not far away. After saying a few words, his and the middle-aged man's their gazes swept towards Lin Yi, who was standing by the window. Even though they were hundreds of feet apart, Lin Yi could still clearly feel the frightening murderous intent coming towards him. Nan Tianyong. This name popped up in Lin Yi's mind, even though he'd never seen this person before. Although he had never seen this person before, his intuition told him. This middle-aged man must be Yuja's master, Nan Tianyong. Looking at this scene, Lin Yi's heart sank. If he only met Yuja today, it would be a little troublesome, but it wouldn't be a big deal. Even though Yuja was in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm and was a level higher than him. After all, he had already beaten the other party half to death last time, so there was nothing to be afraid of this time. However, if Nan Tianyong were to be added into the mix, then it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to escape unscathed. As the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, there was no doubt that Nan Tianyong's strength was strong, even if he couldn't compare to the few guest chamberlains in charge of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. However, it was definitely not something that a newbie like Lin Yi, who was only at the peak of the early stage of Foundation establishment stage, could contend against. If he was targeted by such an expert in a place like this, it would be impossible for him to escape. No matter how much he thought about it, he never thought that he would be stopped by this master and disciple in the inner street. This time, the trouble today was really a little big. Seeing that Lin Yi's expression was a little serious, Hong Zhong couldn't help but suggest, "Young hero Lin, if you need, this old man can find a way to get a guest chamberlain to escort you back." The status of a guest chamberlain in the Hong Chamber of Commerce was extremely high. Under normal circumstances, other than protecting the Chamber of Commerce, they wouldn't accept any assigned tasks. However, Hong Zhong's status as the branch manager was far from simple. With his strength and popularity, even these arrogant guest chamberlains were willing to give him face. Asking a guest chamberlain to escort Lin Yi home had already gone beyond the scope of business, but was a real favor. However, Lin Yi still quickly declined. "Thank you for your kindness, Manager Hong, but there's no need to go through so much trouble. I have my own ways to deal with it." Hong Zhong couldn't help but be stunned. Even with his rich experience after hearing this, he began to not understand this Lin second. With the strength of the early stage of the foundational level, he was able to deal with the middle stage of the foundational level Yuja and even beat Yuja to the brink of death. Although this result was somewhat out of Hong Zhong's expectations, It was not incomprehensible. Although it was rare to see someone of a higher cultivation level, in Hong Zhong's eyes, Lin's second was not an ordinary person, so it was not particularly strange for him to be able to do such a thing. However, Lin's second could deal with Yu Jia, but it didn't mean that he could deal with Nan Tianyong. After all, these two people were completely different concepts. Yu Jia was only a middle stage of the foundational level, but his master, Nan Tianyong, was a peak late stage of the foundational level. He was only one step away from the perfected stage of the foundational level. For Lin's second, who was only at the peak early stage of the foundational level, Yu Jia, who was in the middle stage of the foundational level, was still within the range of the foundational level. However, Nan Tianyong, who was at the peak late stage of the foundational level, was definitely not an existence that Lin's second could deal with. Absolutely impossible. One was at the peak early stage of the foundational level, and the other was at the peak late stage of the foundational level. There was a difference of 4 levels between them. Nan Tianyong didn't even need to use any martial arts techniques. A simple punch or kick would be enough to completely defeat Lin's second. There was no suspense in this. This was common sense. No matter how strong Lin Air's background was, it was impossible for him to make a comeback. It was also because of this that Hong Zhong took the initiative to offer to do him a favor by sending a guest elder to escort him back. However, what Hong Zhong didn't expect was that Lin's second actually refused without hesitation. Moreover, the refusal was very straightforward. Hong Zhong couldn't help but start to speculate. Could it be that this young man, who was only at the peak early stage of the foundational level, really had the confidence to deal with Nan Tianyong, who was at the peak late stage of the foundational level? This was simply impossible. What he didn't know was that the main reason why Lin rejected his proposal so straightforwardly was because he didn't want to expose his identity. After all, if he let the guest expert of the Hong Chamber of Commerce escort him back, then it would be very difficult for him to conceal his true identity. And once people knew that Lin Yi was just a newcomer of the Blue Cloud Pavilion wearing a face-changing mask, then this matter would really be difficult to resolve. Therefore, in comparison, Lin Yi would rather face a dangerous person like Nan Tianyong alone than let his true identity be exposed. But then again, when Lin Yi said that he had a way to deal with Nan Tianyong and Yu Jia, it wasn't completely a lie. In fact, in this short period of time, he had already thought of a countermeasure. Although it wasn't very realistic to defeat the two of them, if he only wanted to smoothly escape, then he still had a lot of confidence. He just needed to prepare in advance. Chapter 38:26. While the two of them were talking at the window on the second floor, Yu Jia suddenly made a gesture to Lin Yi. He placed his right palm in front of his neck and slashed it. He shouted, "If you're so capable, then don't come out for the rest of your life. You can stay here." Although he didn't dare to cause trouble in the Hong Chamber of Commerce, no one could stop him if he cursed on the street. Throat-cutting ceremony? Looks like this Yu Jia has a deep grudge against you. Hong Zhong couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. As a businessman, he hadn't seen this kind of provocative gesture that wouldn't stop until the other party was dead for a very long time. Lin Yi responded with a faint smile and didn't say anything. However, Hong Zhong could clearly feel that this second Lin didn't really care about Yu Jia. Therefore, the reason why he was afraid of the throat-cutting ceremony was because of Nan Tianyong beside Yu Jia. Could this young man really be this unfathomable? Even though Hong Zhong had seen countless people, he had never had this kind of experience. He was obviously just an unremarkable early-stage foundation establishment expert. But every time he interacted with the second Lin, he unconsciously felt that this person was unfathomable. In the past, this was something unimaginable. A completely unfathomable early-stage foundation establishment expert with Hong Zhong's eyesight was definitely a very ridiculous thing, but he had actually encountered it. The reason why he treated Lin Yi so well other than wanting to catch a big fish with a long line, was also a very important reason. He wanted to see what the limits of this young man who called himself Second Lin would be in the future. After a while, the manservant of the Hong Chamber of Commerce had already prepared all the spiritual herbs listed on the list according to Lin Yi's instructions. They were all packed up and delivered to Lin Yi. Young hero Lin, this is a total of 300 spiritual jades. Thank you for your patronage. Hong Zhong placed the entire bag of spiritual herbs in front of Lin Yi and took Lin Yi's spiritual jade card. He chuckled. Not at all. Shopkeeper Hong is too polite. I should be the one thanking you. Lin Yi nodded at Hong Zhong. The list that he had given out contained more than 10 types of spiritual herbs. Although most of them were common spiritual herbs, and none of them were extremely rare like the heart-devouring exquisite grass. Even if they were all of high quality, the price of a single stalk would not be too high. However, there were too many of them. There were dozens of spiritual herbs. Moreover, it was requested to be made in 5 sets. According to the Hong Chamber of Commerce's price, it would be at least 350 spiritual jades. Even if Lin Yi's spiritual jade card had a 10% discount, it would still be at least 320 spiritual jades. However, Hong Zhong only charged him 300 spirit jades. This price was almost equivalent to the treatment of a VIP spirit jade card. It was another favor that came at little cost. But Lin Yi didn't want to reject the offer. Since the other party was willing to give him a discount like this, he didn't mind. That meant that they had the intention to rope him in. It was definitely not a bad thing to be valued and roped in by a business god like Hong Zhong. If he rejected the other party's good intentions because he was pretentious, he would have a preconceived impression of him. Then it would be very difficult to establish a deep friendship in the future. Although Lin Yi didn't have 300 spiritual jades on him, he had some in his card. Don't forget that Hong Zhong had given him 400 spiritual jades when he gave him the spiritual jade card. Strictly speaking, even the spiritual herbs that Lin Yi bought this time were given by Hong Zhong. In order to befriend this potential stock, Hong Zhong had spent a lot of capital. However, it was impolite not to reciprocate. Lin Yi wasn't the kind of person who liked to take advantage of others. He had received so much care from Hong Zhong, but he didn't want to repay the other party at all. That wasn't his style. After taking the bag of spiritual herbs, Hong Zhong thought that Lin Yi would leave. However, he didn't expect that Lin Yi would suddenly think of something and take out a small wooden box from his sleeve and hand it over. This is... Hong Zhong's eyes suddenly lit up. Although he did want to befriend Lin Yi in front of him, he was a businessman through and through. If he couldn't get anything in return from the other party, then no matter how extraordinary the other party was, out of professional ethics, he couldn't continue to work unilaterally. As the shopkeeper of the North Island branch of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce, Hong Zhong couldn't get many benefits from the other party. However, the 2 top-grade bottleneck-breaking elixirs last time really benefited him a lot. After all, although the bottleneck-breaking elixir was common, the top-grade bottleneck-breaking elixir, like the one last time, was extremely rare even in the Middle Island, where the top alchemists gathered. Since he was assigned to the North Island decades ago, the number of top-grade bottleneck-breaking elixirs that passed through Hong Zhong's hands could be counted on one hand. For the North Island branch of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce, every top-grade bottleneck-breaking elixir was a feast to enhance the influence of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, the 2 top-grade bottleneck-breaking elixirs that Lin Yi gave him last time could be said to be a genuine gift. This time, seeing that the other party was only here to purchase spiritual herbs, Hong Zhong didn't think that there would be such a good thing. Moreover, judging from Lin Yi's behavior at the beginning, it seemed that he really didn't plan to sell any elixirs. However, now for some reason he suddenly changed his mind. If people respect me, I will respect them tenfold. Is this Lin Yi a guy with this kind of style? Hong Zhong was a man of experience, after all, and it didn't take long for him to understand the reason behind Lin Yi's actions. He couldn't help but smile knowingly. Mutual benefits were the only way to go in the long run, and this Lin heir was a natural businessman as well. He thought that this time it would be the top-grade, bottleneck-breaking elixir like last time. However, when he opened the lid of the wooden box, Hong Zhong couldn't help but be stunned. There were 3 elixirs in the wooden box, but they were not bottleneck-breaking elixirs, but bottleneck-building elixirs. They were also different from the bottleneck-building elixirs called bottleneck-building elixirs in the secular world. Although they both had the word foundation establishment in them, the value of bottleneck-breaking elixirs was obviously incomparable to bottleneck-building elixirs. Bottleneck-building elixirs were only for people under the foundation establishment stage, while bottleneck-breaking elixirs were for experts in the foundation establishment stage. They were on completely different levels. In terms of selling price, a normal bottleneck-breaking elixir could be priced at 400 spirit jade, but a bottleneck-building elixir could be priced at 250 spirit jade at most. And this was even because of the strong request of the Alchemy Hall. After all, the Alchemy Hall casually charged 200 spirit jade for refining elixirs. If the selling price in the market was lower than 200 spirit jade, no one would find the Alchemy Hall to refine elixirs. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.